three of us have been out at a cold, breezy soccer game, so kind of thawing out a bit.
Okay. Yeah, it got chilly.
It's different now.
No.
Yeah, mine's off.
Is your mic off too?
Actually, Mark don't have mics beside
I turned mine off. I just turned mine completely off.
I didn't join the computer audio at all.
well, you have to turn your volume down too.
Or kill your mic, or I'll mute your mic and kill your speaker. It should be.
That's what I just did.
'It was me. Zoom unmuted me. That was a little mine of its own. 6 o'clock, everybody here ready to go? Okay, go ahead and call the meeting into order. With all who wish, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, we have agenda adjustments. Meredith and I have two proposed agenda adjustments, which the board sees in the red copy, adding an item 8D, approving minimum wage adjustment MOU to ESP contract, and item 8E, approve SRF application for ASA ventilation. So I would make a motion to add those two items as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Any further agenda adjustments or discussion? We'll go ahead and take a vote. Beth?
Hi, everyone. Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Okay, so the agenda is modified. Next up, we have minutes. We have the minutes for September 21st. I would make a motion to adopt as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion, comments, or edits? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Beth?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up, we come to warrants. We don't have a list in front of me. Are there?
There are, they're on the electronic version. I can list them out.
Okay, no, I have the electronic version here too. Okay, I would make a motion to approve payroll warrants 7 and 8, regular warrant 7 and 8, bond warrants 45, 46, and 47, and bond anticipation note warrants 8 and 20, and main purse retirement for September. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Beth?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Now we're into public comment. Occasionally, as tonight, we have a dedicated public comment period, as well as a general public comment period. So we will start, as we usually do, with the dedicated public comment. So this was specifically advertised as a comment on student recognitions and awards given in the schools. So we'll take that first, and then after that closes, we'll switch to a general public comment period. So I see, yeah, if you'd like to speak on the awards, go ahead and type your name into the chat section, and I'll call you. And I see Aaron first, so go ahead, and Aaron.
Thank you for taking me quickly. My phone is dying and I'm not doing well here. So just real quickly, I want to make sure that you all understand that although I was an employee of RSU 26, I'm speaking of my own experiences as a parent. I have had 10 years at ASA with various changing award systems. I've had 6 years at OMS, and I've had 4 years at OHS, all as a parent, watching the award systems and how they work. And while I think it is very important for us to take the time to recognize the incredibly hard work put into a lot of the students that are doing the hard work, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The same students get the same awards every single time. And those students who are incapable for whatever reason, typically because they don't have the support, they don't have the necessarily the ability to get all A's and B's or get an honor roll or get National Honor Society. Those students are generally left out, except that they're still included in all of these award ceremonies, except for at the National Honor Society, which is, I think, works great, by the way. You award the people who are participating in the program, and that's wonderful. But specifically, my now graduated eldest child was the only student in his 8th grade celebration that did not receive an award for something other than participating in 8th grade. And he was the only student that did not receive another award. I am thankful he did not notice at the time. He noticed afterward, but it was devastating to watch. And every other student noticed that he was the only one that did not get called up. And while my son was absolutely capable of achieving all A's and B's, it was not something that he did or he held as important to him at that time, which, you know, I mean, of course, that was his choice, but there were other reasons. I also think very specifically, and I don't think we're doing it anymore, or at least we haven't the last year, the attendance awards are nonsensical. We do not want to encourage students to come when they're sick. Obviously, we now have a pandemic. We really don't want to encourage that. And doing other things like in my son's case, he had an opportunity to go to a trip to Antarctica. And although he did all the work that the school had provided, he was not capable of being in attendance. So obviously that was gone down by the wayside. So I think that one in particular is devastating. But when you encourage students to do their best, when their best is not honorable, you are missing an opportunity to include them, and they are not currently included in the way that are specifically middle school, because that's my most recent opportunity as a parent. So I just wanted to say I would really encourage you folks to do some research into this and really look at what the point of doing these award systems is, what you're trying to encourage students to do, which if it is to do their best, then you need to award students for doing their best. And I don't believe that specifically honor roll is the way to do that. And certainly not in front of every other student in their grade. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Please do try and keep it to about 2 minutes if you can. I'm not going to set a timer, but who's next? Jen Tyne.
Thank you, Brian. I'm assuming you guys can hear me. Let's see, a couple things I just have, and I didn't get my thoughts together on this beforehand, but I agree with Aaron that attendance awards, there seems to be plenty of research that attendance awards aren't what they set out to be whenever they started them 15, 20 years ago. As in terms of academic awards, I was really happy when we moved to Orono to find out that there's no valedictorian and salutatorian. I think that is a great move. I don't know when it was made, but the less pressure that's on our kids, the better in terms of that. And I would argue that we don't even have to recognize the top 10 in the senior class, that we can get away with recognizing through the National Honor Society or something like that. I agree with Aaron that especially my experience at the high school, it seems like when they do these underclassmen awards, that the different departments aren't talking to each other. I'm surprised when the same person gets 2, 3, or 4 awards from 4 different departments. Like there should be some communication that so-and-so is getting an award and doesn't get more than one. But I would argue that the entire award system is not necessary. And I would like to see the high school at least ask the students what they think about the award system, because I would be surprised if there are a lot of students who like that undergraduate awards ceremony. So anyway, like Aaron, I didn't do a whole lot of research, but I definitely would welcome the board doing research and the staff and really figuring out why we're doing these awards. If it's for motivation, or is it really providing motivation for students? I'm not sure it is. So anyway, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to speak on the issue of awards for students? Jody, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for opening this up to public comment. It's a really important topic that I've been thinking a lot about. I'm going to try to keep it really short, but I have so much. So I've been witnessing a real transformation with my kids. I have one in each school. Stark difference between ASA and the other 2 schools in terms of what's happening with the larger culture of exclusionary practices that are often public, including the award ceremonies, but also Student of the Month and other such things that all the students are aware of. And so there's a lot here that I'm concerned about. My question to everyone is like the others, who are we serving by this? And if it is the students that are getting the awards, you know, at what expense to everyone else? I know some teachers feel proud that they are choosing those students that often get overlooked, but I would say that there are 80 other students that get overlooked. So it sort of circumvents the issue I see at hand. There are lots of possible ways to get around this, where I'm seeing a lot of negative student to student and student to teacher relationship happening, with students feeling judged constantly by the teachers because they know they're all being given these possible awards, not for specific things like winning the spelling bee or getting a hat trick or something like that, but something that's a little more vague. I also know that when awards actually do work, rewards, if they're going to work, they should be pretty prompt and not over the course of a month, over the course of a year. It should be pretty specific to what the student's doing. And I also agree that effort is something that, as an educator myself, I mean, to try to judge what kind of effort students are putting in seems absurd. So I don't think we really have that insight. So I guess what I would offer is the idea of, I like the donut celebration as a punctuation for the quarters, like everyone comes, they all got through the quarter, great. I'm absolutely, I'm floored by the fact that the all A students get up and then the all A and B students get up and then everyone else is left sitting there. That's just, to me, that basically violates FERPA, I would think. But anyway, and the ones that are up for all A's are not happy either. They feel uncomfortable for the other students too. So that's a problem I see. I know that the high school, having talked to the principal, I know that there's this currency about getting into good colleges and needing those book awards and all those awards. But I do question if we're doing that, if they're justified as a means of helping some students get into college, what's the school doing to support and encourage kids for whom college is either financially not possible or it's not their chosen path? So where are those, school-chosen, school-led supportive measures? So I guess that's, I have a lot more, but I will stop there for now. Thank you very much. I hope that we can continue this conversation. And I do actually have a lot of sources that I can share, but I won't go into detail about it now. So I'm happy to send a list along.
Yeah, if you want to send a list maybe to the superintendent and board members, that would be great. Anybody else like to speak on the awards issue? Last chance to speak on the awards issue. The board will have a preliminary discussion tonight too. I probably should, frame the context that this is the start of a conversation, which is not meant to be it's meant to be just exactly that. I don't think, this is going to turn into a policy next month, but I think if we're sensing that there's an interest and attraction on this issue, we could start doing some additional digging in the spring. And I don't know what that looks like. Somebody mentioned surveying students. That would certainly make sense to me, maybe surveying parents, but we'll see what the board thinks about it. But if we're feeling like there's traction, this is something that I think is probably going to play out over the next 6 months. And this is the start of the conversation. So I don't want somebody to walk away disappointed if there's not a vote tonight. But we're hearing the community, and if we feel like there's an issue, we're committed to following through on it over that kind of a time frame. Wish we could go faster, but we just have so many things going on right now. Okay, anybody else? Last chance for speaking on awards.
Somebody with a hand up, don't you? No, maybe
Somebody raise a hand.
I thought I saw one, but maybe not.
Somebody posted the shipping letter from Sarah J.
Yeah, we kind of have a mixed response to letters and reading them, but I think in this case, since it wasn't sent to the board, but you have it, please go ahead and read it if you want.
Okay, thank you. She couldn't be here. She wanted to be. So this is from Sarah Jokin. Thank you to the school board for bringing this important topic up for discussion. I'm writing to advocate for a broader discussion among Orono school communities regarding the practice of holding recognition ceremonies for students in middle and high school. I've brought this issue to the attention of the OMS administration a number of times. And thus far, I haven't heard much of an argument for continuing the practice beyond what we've always done. If there is truly value in the practice, I think it's important to explore this and help those of us who have experienced it negatively to understand where that value lies. If, on the other hand, a thorough exploration of the topic reveals that it's not achieving the intended goals, I think we owe it to the children of our community to come together to find ways we can honor their accomplishments. In our family, the award ceremony has been a source of consternation since our children began middle school. Whether our children receive recognition or not, it seems the only truly positive aspect of these gatherings they report on are the donuts. When receiving a recognition, our children report they feel pride, but quickly the discomfort of watching others. No one wants to be labeled as a teacher's pet, and when they are not recognized, they interpret it as a failure or deficiency. There's nothing more heartbreaking than hearing your bright young middle schooler who's already struggling to negotiate all the other changes and challenges that come with entering middle school declare that they're not smart. Middle schoolers are, for the most part, still developing their growth mindset and are still operating with a fairly fixed mindset. Essentially, this means that if you're not a winner, then you are a loser, and we've spent countless hours trying to overcome this. The perception of student body as to why awards are granted is also troubling. Our child reported that when a teacher asked the class whether they thought it was a good idea, one classmate shared, who has received many awards, shared that he thought it was a great way for the school to recognize the students who try hard. This was especially hurtful to our child, who has to spend on average 3 times as long on homework assignments as his peers. I could give countless examples of why I'd like to see changes in the practice, but to get the best sense where I'm coming from, I encourage the board and RSU 26 administration to read an article by George Couros, C-O-U-R-O-S, titled The Impact of Awards. That's also on my source list too. So he'll be presenting to the main superintendents in the near future, and he makes some great points about why awards should be relegated to the past. Obviously, there's a lot about extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation, and more so than just cone. This leads me to the arguments we've been presented in favor of continuing to hold recognition ceremonies. In this day and age, as we work hard to develop more diverse and inclusive environments in our schools and workplaces, and as we examine the course of history that brought us to this point, I cannot accept it's the way we've always done it as a valid reason. I thank the board for taking the time to hear these comments today.
Great, thank you. One last call for other comments on student awards. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to general public comment. So obviously anything else on the agenda, but honestly, any question of concern is appropriate at this time. Any public comment? One last chance for public comment. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on with the agenda. I'd like to thank everybody who showed up and spoke tonight. And as I said, we'll get there, I'm going to guess, in about 40 minutes. It's item number 7B on the agenda. Okay, next up we have acknowledgements. Jake?
Nothing at this time.
I don't think I have anything new, except I know it's still a grinding year for everybody, students and staff, and I appreciate the fact that it doesn't look like a grinding year. Things are going, a lot of things are happening well, and I know that's because people are really stepping up, and I appreciate that. Patrick?
Yeah, I recently had the experience of someone I know in a different school district had both their children come down with COVID, and their experience interacting with the school led me to really appreciate the job that everyone here is doing in terms of contact tracing and really working with families. And so I just wanted to say thank you to everyone involved in that process of outreach to families. I know it's a ton of extra work, and at least compared to some other school in Maine, which I'm not going to name, we are doing a fantastic job here. So thank you.
Mark?
I have nothing at this time. Thank you.
Beth?
I don't have anything either right now. Thanks.
Thanks. Meredith?
A couple. We had the Bangor Daily News reporter here yesterday, and they were looking at the facilities to an article. I don't know if it's made for yet. I haven't had time to look today, but we were showing the kitchen, and so when we were talking to Ben, and it just struck me as I was describing our situation in the kitchen and staffing shortages, how remarkable it is of what's been able to be accomplished with such short staff in both kitchens, particularly the kitchen up here. And I just want to acknowledge all the food service staff for their work to get the year off the ground and despite some really challenging circumstances. And then secondly, we had a PD day recently, and just lots of people doing, supporting one another through that day with professional development and work, and really acknowledge the staff for their leadership and, working alongside our administrators that day to make really great use of that professional learning time together.
Great, thank you. Anything we missed? Okay, we'll go ahead on to reports, and we'll start with principal reports. Kristen, you want to start?
I sure will. Hi, everyone. Another great month down at ASA. We have had a lot of busy days, and we are just moving right along. I shared a picture in my principal report. I hope you got to see it. It is beautiful. It stretches the length of the hallway by the office. Sarah James had her kiddos do Dot Day, celebrate Dot Day. And so it is just a beautiful piece of art in our hallway there. Our kindergarten students got to go on a field trip to Treewergies. Very, very exciting. They came home and the rain held off. It was on Friday. The rain held off until they got back, and they all came home little pumpkins. It was a great trip. We want to say a special thank you for Meredith and the team getting together, Adam Clark Fitness, to be able to provide some workouts and some chair massages, just some really cool stuff. We want to say that's going to be great, and we're looking forward to that in November. I did mention the PTO doing a fundraiser with Chipotle. Unfortunately, I was told today that that's not going to be able to happen. I guess the store has had some problems, and so that is not going to be able to happen. So I just wanted to pass along that information. But they're in the works of doing some more. So it's lots of, they're always working to see how they can support us, and we appreciate that. We have some volunteers that are ready to roll to support us in various ways. So we're looking forward to working with some volunteers at ASA again. As Meredith mentioned, we had our October 8th in-service day. We worked on a variety of topics. One of the things we looked at was our current NWEA data. And then we looked at how to support our little ones that are having maybe a little bit of a trickier time. What sort of tier 1 supports can we provide? And that's basically at the classroom level, what we can provide there. We worked a little bit more on adding things for our quarantine learning packets so that in the event that a child does need to go into quarantine, we are ready to roll as quickly as we can. And so that work is very much appreciated by the staff. I know that takes a lot of time and a lot of work, so I appreciate all that. And we continue to work on around professional development. We're working with the interactive displays, which are so cool. Every time I go into a classroom, every teacher uses it a little bit differently, and it's really neat to see. I was in Angie McLaughlin's room a couple days ago and watching the kindergartners go up, and they're checking off that they're there. They've arrived for the day, and they circle their name on the interactive display, and it's so cool. So we really appreciate those. One last thing, the student council at ASA met today, and we are having our very first Spirit Day, which kind of feels great, to get back into the swing of things here. We'll have our first Spirit Day. It'll be next Friday, October 29th. We're going to have a PJ and wacky hair day. So just like you just rolled out of bed. So that's going to be awesome. There'll also be information coming home about a canned food drive that will be collecting some of those things as well. So we've got lots of fun stuff going on at ASA.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from the board?
I'd like to ask a question, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Kristen.
Hi.
Can you tell us a little bit more specifically about some of the additions to the quarantine learning plans?
We're working on some paper packets and some individual like baggies and things like that for our kiddos. One of the neat things that we've been able to do is we're looking at individuals as far as someone heard Mrs. Briggs. So we're working on making sure that the work that we're able to send home is what would be pertinent to that child. So it's at their level, and that they are able to hopefully be able to do it independently as much as possible, because we know that this is not easy on parents either. So.
Thanks for the additional detail. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, we'll go ahead. Richard.
Good evening, everyone. First, I want to start by thanking the speakers on the award ceremony, and I welcome in future conversation on that topic. So I wanted to start by some of the things I highlighted in the board report that was shared out. Student and staff celebrations. We've had a number of good things going on in the month of October around how fitting as we're into October and the harvest and those types of things. So our Riot Cookery program kicked off last week with some fun cooking. Involved about 10 or 12 students, harvested vegetables from our school garden, and cooked up a great meal with 2 kinds of meatballs, turkey and beef. So that was a fun day for those students and staff for supporting that program. We also kicked off our Riot Buddy program, which is a mentoring program that it's been ongoing the last number of years between OMS and OHS students, where we match up the younger students with an older mentor. We had 43 students from the middle and high school participating in that program. So they get off to a nice start on October 14th. Hats off to Mrs. Archer. I don't know if she's on the call tonight, but nice job organizing our school garden. It's been a big hit with students, but not only has it been a fun thing for students, but it's been a great learning experience. We had recent guests from Circle Farm come in and work with 7th grade science. And so that's been a nice experience. As I also noted, we use the garden vegetables in our Friday cooking program, and vegetables from the student garden have also been sent home as part of our Backpack Friday food program. So that was well utilized and a good learning experience. Our collaboration with families section, we have established dates and times for fall parent conferences, November 10th and 18th. So we're going to use a similar system, like a virtual system this year, similar to what we did last year. And so those are on the calendar for November 10th and 18th. An update on our dental clinic. We had, I believe it was 22 students receive dental screening. A number of students received things like temporary fillings, referrals, cleanings, fluoride treatments, etc. So that was also on October 14th, and that was a big success. And so we're looking forward to scheduling the second visit later on this winter with Alyssa Wade, and so that was real nice. I want to add also that they're coming for 2 days to serve high school students coming right up. I wanted to comment on our recent remote day that we had, and while I'm not hoping to have another one anytime soon, it was a good trial run. We're able to offer synchronous instruction to students across all grade levels. It went exceptionally well, exceeded my expectations anyhow. I could say that student attendance was at like normal levels, as if we had an in-person day. So that was, I was very pleased with the attendance in that regard. So hats off to students, and hats off to staff for shifting quickly to make that day a success on very short notice. We did follow our synchronous bell schedule that offers a little shortened class periods, 30 minutes, and it gives students an opportunity to have a little breather in between classes, so they're not on screen all day long. So anyways, I just wanted to note that that I'm very pleased with how that went on that particular day. Supervision and evaluation update. Teacher meetings with me are ongoing this fall, and in fact, we're just about through them. Will definitely be completed with those meetings before the end of October. So that's going well. And in those discussions, we're tailoring our discussions depending on whether teachers are in year 1, 2, or 3 of the evaluation cycle. On to current student enrollment. We added 3 new students just this past week. So we had a 7th grader and an 8th grader start this week, and another 7th grader just started at the end of last week. So that's good news. Always like to see new students coming. And what else do we have here? I provided a brief overview of NWA testing. I mainly wanted to note that we had a preliminary look at achievement data, and we still have a number of students who need to complete testing. So we'll get an update once we get the whole school completed. But I was able to note that we had a good conversation during our October 13th in-service day, and we identified students for interventions, and review of NWA test scores were a big part of that conversation. And on the athletics front, good news, mostly. October 12th was OMS Sports Day. We had all our teams playing at home on that day. It's a great football game, 40-46 loss, but it was back and forth, very exciting. We had a good student section at that game. We had a lot of success for our boys and girls soccer teams and our cross-country teams on that day. It was just a good day, and a lot of school spirit shown. And today we had our 2 playoff soccer games. I'm happy to note that our girls had a 2-1 win versus Holbrook. Girls finished 2nd place overall in the PVML standings. So nice job to the girls. And our boys finished 1st in the standings in the PVML, but they lost today in penalty kicks. So they do not advance to the finals, but they put in a great effort and finished 1st place overall in the league. So well done to our girls and boys soccer teams. And that's what I have for this evening.
Thank you. And at the high school, Sam or Meredith?
I'll go first. So I just want to echo, and so I won't repeat a lot of the things that were mentioned, such as the dental clinic and other things that we've been sharing with OMS, and I appreciate that relationship and collaboration, Richard, so thank you. Also, I wanted to recognize the work and success of our homecoming week. It was from Monday the 4th through Saturday the 9th, and it really was a collaboration of many, many people and a lot of flexibility and creative thinking, and a lot of great participation from our students and our community members. Special thank you to Mrs. Clark, Miss Emerson, and the student council students who were behind a lot of the smaller details that go into such a great week, as well as Mr. Archer and the fire department and the local community behind the softball dugout, who allowed us to have our great bonfire. That was definitely something the students had missed and was really enjoyed by many. It was a large percentage of our student body that attended. And as well as thank you to UMaine for hosting us. Yes, we would have loved to have it on our own field, but it was a great event for the homecoming game on Friday night to top it all off, and with some follow-up games and races on Saturday. So just thanks to everybody, because it was definitely something that students and staff and community really enjoyed, and started to feel like things were kind of back to being our creative, fun, cultured self that we can be. I also want to say congratulations to our math team who competed in their first math meet virtually on Wednesday, October 6th. There were 14 students who participated. And of the 12 teams participating with the Eastern Maine Math League, our team placed 2nd with 169 points. And senior Tommy Owen led the team with 3 perfect rounds and a score of 48. And our 9th grader, William Hardy, came in 2nd with an impressive 25. So that's a really great start to our math team program. They certainly have some meets coming up. So hopefully people can keep hearing such good grades and responses from them. Also wanted to congratulate Clarice Bell. She was the 2021 Class C Girls State Individual Golf Champion. She shot a round of 90 and was 3 strokes better than the second place. So she did a fantastic job. And we've also had great pride and recognition in our cross country team and runners, particularly just in their sportsmanship and overall compassion to other runners and other school districts has just been amazing, particularly as you all probably know about Ruth Riot. So just really proud of our students stepping up and showing who we are, and not just their competitive natures, but also as humans. Also, I wanted to, with collaboration with the families, we've had our second parent advisory group meeting last week. We had many families attend, probably about 6 or so. We discussed some topics that came up last meeting, but also look forward into things like food insecurity and how to rebuild our food pantry that we kind of had to relocate after all of our building renovations have occurred. And we've got some great plans and ideas for that, as well as some upcoming food drives and gathering of funds to help provide families some food over the holidays, but also ongoing. And we also had our parent teacher conferences last week virtually. A lot of great attendance. Thank you so much to all the parents and guardians who attended, and teachers who put the time in to make those conferences worthwhile. And there are still some ongoing because we had some teachers that just had so many parents that requested a meeting. So they're making additional meetings on the side or in their planning period. So thank you for that as well. And I also wanted to take a second to just really recognize and appreciate our new facilities director, Bill Cody. He has been amazingly helpful up at the high school to finish up some details that needed to be done, to also address some things that have been long standing just concerns for some people in their classrooms and in our office. And I just want to say he's just been doing an amazing job. So Billy, if you're on the call, thank you. And we will continue to support you in any way we can. And also our flu shot clinic was amazing. So Karen Martin, if you're on the call, thank you for that as well. I believe I was told that we had our highest numbers yet that participated, and we just really appreciate you supporting that, organizing that, and facilitating that in such a crazy year that we've had. It really helps to know that our community has that opportunity. So thanks for that as well. Meredith.
Thanks, Sam. So as you can hear in Sam's summary of the cultural and social and infrastructural elements of the work that is being done here, it gives you a sense of how many layers of dimension come together to create this, this pretty vibrant life that we have happening in the building. And that is only possible because of the hard work and commitment of so many people community-wide, truly. And all of that is in addition to the teaching and learning that is happening simultaneously. It has been a full fall here at OHS, and 3 pieces that I want to touch on today are heavy lifts that are also in some ways happening to support and fuel the teaching and learning that is happening here in a way that allows us to continue growing even in the midst of the challenges and stress and trauma recovery that we are experiencing. So the first of those is our first Nuia administration of the year. In some ways, I feel like this was the or I'm hoping maybe it is the benchmark for future administrations, in that we have cultivated a rhythm. We have fine-tuned our identification of testing windows, testing timing within the restrictions created by the state. And at this point, we are between 75 and 79% of tests administered across grades 9 through 11. We have the remainder of this week and the rest of next week to catch those remaining students. But for a building that just a couple of years ago really was fairly new to Nuia administration, the fact that we are capturing essentially 3/4 of our population over the span of a couple of weeks is a huge accomplishment that is to the credit of the folks in the building who are learning together how we can do this while continuing with the teaching and learning that assessment is supposed to support. while Nuia is happening, we have also launched our self-reflection process as part of our NEASC reaccreditation visit, which is scheduled hopefully for April. We don't have a firm date yet. But for those folks who are unfamiliar, this is a process that essentially demands that building wide and to some extent community wide, we look at layers and layers of the work that we are doing and what is succeeding and where there are areas for growth, so that in this iteration of the process, we identify goals toward which we want to work that we will then commit to and develop a plan for, so that when we are revisited in 2 years, we can demonstrate the progress that we've made. And we accomplished that with the help of Margie Innes and Jen Branchflower, who strategized how this could work, and who spent a lot of hours organizing a framework that we could use, so that when faculty came together during our professional development day, the day ultimately turned into really robust conversations across departments about different facets of the work that we do here. And I think as teachers, we know that we really find that time meaningful. We don't get enough of it. And that authentic dialogue is going to be the foundation for our self-reflection report that will be available for your viewing at some point in the spring. So thank you so much to Jen and Margie for the hard work that went into that. The third piece that I wanted to touch on this evening is in its most recent example, a presentation from Chris Newell about the demystification of Thanksgiving. And this is a presentation that is a touch point for us in our process toward cultivating a district-wide Wabanaki Studies program that we as a district have committed to. But as a piece, I think it's meaningful to point out that it is one artifact that demonstrates the degree to which we have, as a community, come together, grappled with a question, identified resources, brought in stakeholders, talked about not just what this means as an idea, but what this means as a commitment for this community to our students, and are working toward unraveling the pieces that need unraveling in order to eventually feel really confident as a community that we are serving our students well in the ways that we have identified as most important. We had fantastic participation in these presentations. It was something that was relevant across grade levels K to 12, and it's something upon which we are continuing to build. My next curriculum report will include more details on the role of the Wabanaki Studies Workgroup in that, but I think that it is a commitment, not or a reflection, not just of the folks who are in the building, but also our community-wide commitments to manifesting certain goals, that this is something we are continuing to work toward in spite of all of the challenges that we currently face. I'm proud to be here.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to Superintendent Report.
So I have two things, two major topics that I want to report on separate from the agenda to come. First, kind of a perfect segue from that last part of Meredith's report. As you know, we've undertaken an equity audit this year. A district team is currently reviewing the surveys that will be launched November 1st. So before we meet again, we'll have launched our survey phase, which is a really important part of the data collection for the audit. So, look for those surveys, both saying this to the board, but also for people listening, because we hope to have good participation and feedback. The data from those surveys really shape the frame of some of the focus groups and the follow-up visit that is happening a little later in November. So having good participation in the surveys is really valuable for that process. Each school, sorry, so there'll be a survey for each of the 3 schools. At ASA we're doing. Looks like 3rd grade up. We wanted to see the survey to make sure we felt like it was something that 3rd graders could could read and understand. There's some pieces we had some feedback on that we thought were maybe not quite the reading level of a third grader. So we hope that that can be resolved. So there are 3 separate surveys, one for each of the buildings for students. There's a parent survey. There's a teacher kind of instructional professional staff survey. There's a support staff survey, and then a building administrator survey, and then a district administrator survey. So a lot of layers to the survey process, and Brian serving on the team to review the surveys, and each school has individuals doing that as well as Shauna, Meredith, and myself. So a good process for leading up to this really important step in our equity audit. The second thing I wanted to report on is just some staffing changes that have happened since we last met. I think I reported at our last meeting or so that we had filled the OHS admin assistant position with an internal candidate, so that opened up a vacancy. So the OHS admin assistant 2, who's the person who runs the front desk and handles all the visitors, other responsibilities too, but that's kind of where you see that person. That position was also filled internally. So Jess Fine, who's been an admin assistant across ASA and special services, has taken that position. And so now we have to fill the position that is vacated. And so we put out an advertisement for that. We've had a resignation since we've last met. Tim Blasky is a custodian at ASA, and Tim resigned his position. He served the district for 11 years, and so we just want to acknowledge his service to the district and thank him for his work over those years and wish him well. And finally, we have an early notice retirement for the end of this school year, which I'm appreciative to get that notice on. It helps the district plan. So we've received notice from Terry Henry of his planned retirement at the end of this school year. And I checked with him. He's ready for me to make this announcement. So I bring that news forward. Terry has worked he is one of our longest standing employees in the district. At the end of this year, he will have been with the Orono Schools for 34 years. And his retirement caps off a 39-year career in education. So many years of service in education, but especially 34 years to the students of this community is significant. So, I just thank Terry for his service and all the many contributions over the years. I'm meeting with him actually Thursday. We're going to go in and look at the new coral space just to get his perspective on how that space is shaping up and see if he has any advice or ideas for that space. So, he's still very much engaged with this year and doing great things with students. So we appreciate his work this year and all others. Those are the separate items. We have a lot to discuss down the agenda. I'll be bringing more items, but do you have any questions?
Okay, seeing no questions. Next up, Ecuador trip presentation. It's in the policy that international trips require board approval. So that's in this context. And of course, with COVID, it's a little more complicated, but Meredith or Chris, do you want to introduce it?
Yeah, I'll just start. Chris Crocker has joined. Chris is the trip leader and has taken our students on these trips for a lot of years. So this is a trip that was planned for last year in the spring, and we postponed the trip when COVID was our reality early last year, and later the company actually stopped all international travel, and so we were able to postpone to this spring. Some of the details that we didn't share with you in the information you have in your folder is that there were 24 students that planned to attend this trip when it was originally scheduled. Around half of those were seniors last year, so they have dropped out of the trip, obviously. And we showed you the number of students still remaining in this trip right now. they are all also seniors this year. We're coming up against a cancellation deadline. These work where they're, the closer you get to the trip, you have increasing penalties for cancellation. And so our penalty deadline is in mid-November. So we really wanted to bring this before you tonight to give some guidance there. One of the things about this trip that's a little different from trips that we've done in the past, and I think it's advantageous to us, is there are 2 planned chaperones for this trip, as you may saw on the list when you looked at it. Chris is going along with Angela Slate, and I think given the year, and if the probably what we all hope doesn't happen, and someone gets ill and we need someone to be with that person, we do have 2 chaperones with this group in addition to our tour leader. So that gives me some comfort knowing there's an additional staff member there. And just reading over all the guidance in this document, they resumed trips in January of 2021. They resumed international travel in March. And they've had great success, really. Their rate of cases is quite low. They've had high 50s, 50,000 travelers during that time, and had minimal COVID cases. They outline all the precautions they have. And so we, Chris, Sam and Meredith, myself, bring this recommendation to you. We feel like these students are going into this with their eyes open about this travel, and the company's track record with the safety precautions is strong. They have a good plan for if someone does become ill, what happens. And so we would like to move forward with this trip at this time, and we want to, do that with the suggestion that we move forward now, unless something dramatic changes. That we think if something dramatic changes, the company would likely change based on what they did last time they had to stop travel. That that would maybe be the threshold that would change things if we decide to move forward tonight. But we've asked questions. Chris has some additional information. I talked with Brian. He had a couple of questions that Chris checked out. One of the questions was about vaccination. Do they have any vaccination requirements? And they just followed whatever the travel requirements are for the country that you're visiting. So that's what they follow in their program. And Ecuador at this time does not have a vaccination requirement. It's a within 72-hour test requirement to enter the country. And then so we'll just leave it at that and see if you have questions that Chris or others can answer.
Any questions or thoughts? I think we probably ultimately do need to take a vote on this, but start with any conversation. I mean, I'll just say, we've said repeatedly through the last year and a half that clubs and sports that are optional are different from classes, and this is basically comes out of Spanish club. It's not tied to a class directly. So it is optional, and I think that's a pretty big criteria. I know at points in the past, Latin America has had some of the worst COVID numbers in the world, but from what I can see today, they actually have better numbers than the US at the moment, if I read that correctly. That could change, of course, but mostly I come back to it's optional. And yes, travel is more dangerous than, staying at home in your house, but there are a large fraction of Americans who choose to travel, are going to travel at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so I think it's hard for me as a school board member to say to a family, you can't choose to travel. And there's really not been a big difference between international travel and local travel, but there's all this theater around, closing the borders. But in reality, once you're sitting in airports and airplanes, it's kind of the same bailiwick. So I feel comfortable as it is. I don't know that I necessarily would trust the company as our only barometer going forward. I'd want to use our independent judgment. And in particular, I noted today that the president of Ecuador announced not quite martial law, but the military are going to be patrolling the streets because of drug gang problems in Ecuador. So, you know, I'm sure our State Department will have opinions about that, and whether it's safe or not too. But I would like to just qualify that I think we should trust our own judgment as well as the company's judgment. But with that, I'm comfortable. Any other thoughts or opinions?
I guess my first question is just kind of a technical one, which is that what is the risk to a school from a liability standpoint, and is that tied in any way to the level of State Department travel advisory? So, for example, right now Ecuador is in a level 3 travel advisory level, which is reconsider travel. You know, if it went to a level 4 travel advisory, would the trip automatically be canceled? Or is there, you know, if it was a level 2 travel advisory, which is exercise increased caution, that seems like that's one of those things where, you know, we can say, yes, this is an extracurricular activity, and there's no doubt this is going to be a wonderful experience for those who attend. And I think international travel is a fantastic opportunity. But I just wanted to know from a technical standpoint, is there any difference depending on the State Department advisory level? Do we know that?
Well, they have had travel going on since January, as I said, but international through March. I don't know Ecuador specifically and where they've been on the scale, but I think they were probably in 4, because I had heard the same thing Brian had, that Latin America was pretty active this summer, particularly as they had their COVID surge. So I think the company is, you know, looking at their safety precautions and looking at what they can do to protect travelers during surges. So I don't think that the company would necessarily change based on 3 to 4. But Chris, did you find anything out about that?
No, I didn't specifically ask the company or my contact at the company about that. I can go back to them and ask, but they definitely will cancel, like they did last year, the trip if there's a danger, if they feel that there's a imminent danger to the students, and they will either put a pause on it, postpone it, or ask if we want to go somewhere else, if it's just in that country.
Thing is, we're never off the hook. So if something happened, wanted to sue, I'm sure we get sued. We do have insurance, we get sued, but this is a big enough company that they're on the hook too. So I take a little comfort in the fact that, you know, it's not a mom and pop operation. We're the only ones who get sued. But I do think your point, you know, level 4 from the State Department is do not travel. I'd have much more concern if we were to go back to a level 4.
Yeah. I think I'd be very uncomfortable supporting anything that goes to a level 4 State Department. I mean, that's like,
that's usually war zones, and
you know, war zones, or, you know, uncontrolled pandemic outbreaks. And I mean, it's usually, I would hate to be like, it's January and we've passed the deadline where we can get a refund, and then all of a sudden the State Department flips it to a level 4 advisory, and people are going because they feel that they're locked in financially. I think that would be a tough place to be. So I think having clarity around that ahead of time from the company would be really wonderful. The other question I had, and again, this falls under I'm just kind of curious about this. I think we do allow a lot more leeway when there's an optional activity and people know the risk going in. I think that's really important. But my question here is that we've got a small group of students and chaperones and trip leaders that are going to be traveling together, kind of intimately in contact for the entire trip. Will everyone on the trip know the vaccination status of everyone else on the trip? And the reason I ask that is, if you are asking someone to take a calculated optional risk and they know that all the other students on the trip are vaccinated, they might make one decision. Whereas if they know that, you know, half the trip is not vaccinated, they might make a different decision about that risk. And again, I don't know what the legal requirements and liabilities and the prohibitions around this are, but I'm just wondering what that situation is.
That's not information that we would share.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't feel comfortable if they felt comfortable sharing it with each other, just like I wouldn't go in my classroom and say, okay, raise your hand if you've been vaccinated. I couldn't do that, and I wouldn't do that. If a student says, hey, I'm vaccinated, are you, if they're talking in the airport on the way to Ecuador or in one of our meetings before, then that's fair game. That's between them. And if they say, you know, I don't feel comfortable sharing, that's on them. So yeah, they, and back to something Meredith had said, that they have to, in order to travel to Ecuador, we either have to show proof of vaccination or have a negative COVID test. So we don't need a negative COVID test if we can prove our vaccination. So I think it's going to be pretty clear once people show proof. Other people might see that, but it's not something I can ask and share with the group like that.
Thank you. And that was what I thought the answer would be. And so then my follow-up to that would be, it seems like an easy way to kind of get around the discomfort with, or the it being illegal to kind of ask people their vaccination status would just be to require COVID vaccination for student participants in this trip. Even though the company's not requiring it, if we required it, and the reason I ask is vaccination is not proof against infection. I know more than one person who's had a breakthrough COVID case. Fortunately for them, their symptoms have been relatively mild. But I also know that the risk of transmitting it is much higher if you are not vaccinated. And I think that as a board member looking at this, I would want to, for an extended period of close contact. We're not talking about an outdoor environment. We're talking about travel and lodging. I would feel very comfortable supporting this if there was a vaccination requirement for participation. And then I think this is a great trip, and I really hope everyone gets to go, and I hope everyone's vaccinated.
Any other thoughts on the board? Okay, then I'm just going to go ahead and make the motion. I would make a motion to authorize the trip to proceed with the understanding that we will continue to exercise judgment as conditions change.
I will second.
Any further discussion? You're welcome to make a motion for an amendment if you want.
So I'd like to make a motion for an amendment to require vaccination for the trip.
Okay, is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to amend the motion to additionally require vaccination, presumably of all students or all participants?
All participants, yeah.
Okay. Any discussion on that?
I suppose my question is.
Go ahead.
Brian, okay. Can we do that? And this is kind of the question of, what are our bounds in requiring vaccines at this point for our students, right? I mean, I know we've talked about this as staff, like for staff, but I think we've talked about that for staff and that was helpful, but we haven't really talked about it for students. So does anyone have a sense of like?
I think really we could, Beth. I think the question is, these families paid quite a bit of money to go on this trip before COVID became, like Chris was saying, January 2020 is when you had the sign-up meeting and then things fell apart. And I guess I feel like these families who are still in this are going with it knowing the risks involved, whether they're vaccinated or not. And I think it would be taking, a step we haven't taken in any other situation with families when, they've outlaid over $3,000, about around $3,000 for this trip at this point. And, so I guess that's a concern I have about that at this point, because that wasn't the rule when they signed up.
I guess I'm not as clear that we could of students. I think the law, as we're starting to see play out, we'll see if the current Supreme Court changes precedent, but the law is pretty clear at the moment that employers can require health things from staff. including vaccination. So I think we could require it of staff. We do have a vaccinator test requirement in place currently. Students it's more complicated. Certainly, I think the advice I've gotten is to attend school, we could not require vaccination right now. That's something that has to be done by a state legislature with a much broader mandate than we have. I think requiring students to get vaccinated to participate in optional activities is a little less clear. I know many universities are requiring vaccines, for example, to be on a sports team, but I don't know that I've heard of that happening anywhere at a K-12 level. I think it's a pretty slippery slope to, the line between you can't require it for participating in the school, and you require it of employees because they work for you, and you can set some work conditions for employees. But the area of participating in optional extracurricular activities is a little grayer, but it's not something that I've heard of any K-12 school. Again, we know California and New York have pushed this at a much broader level across attending school, but not outside of those cases where it's pushed very broadly by a body much more powerful than the local school board. I'm not aware of an instance where it's actually been pushed for optional activities. And the CDC guidelines for sports, for example, for K-12 is around testing. It's not around vaccinations. So I think it's a pretty gray area. I think if somebody sued us, our lawyer would not want to predict what the outcome would be. We might win, but we could definitely easily lose that particular lawsuit as well, would be my read of the literature. But maybe you've had a different discussion with Pete that I haven't had.
I haven't had a conversation with our attorney about it. I just heard a conversation about a state that's doing requiring vaccinations for athletes, but in K-12. But again, as you said, that's the power of a state, not, RSU 26 or no. So it's just it feels different to take that step here when you don't have the backing of, your state government or some larger entity with that. But I think some places are beginning to contemplate that, and I'm hearing some are doing it, but I don't know that for sure.
So I guess, one question, I don't know of any in Maine, and again, laws vary state by state, so I don't want to make too much of a state-to-state comparison, but there certainly were, I think, school districts, weren't there, requiring that some of the larger school districts in California before the state mandate came out. I could be wrong about that. So I guess I'll just drop that for now. I guess I'm going to move on to a different question, which is that, part of this is that there are different requirements for quarantine for when you get back from international travel, for vaccinated and unvaccinated travelers. And so with the unvaccinated travelers, my understanding is that they would still, at least at this point, have to quarantine for an additional 7 days compared to the vaccinated travelers. And so, that's a week of missed class, or a week of, well, we're not, I guess that, quarantine education, right? Which people don't seem to be very excited about. Whereas, if you were vaccinated going on the trip, that would be kind of a non-issue. I guess what I'm coming down on is that if it's possible for us to do this legally, to require vaccination of the trip, I would feel much more comfortable authorizing the trip if that were a requirement. I'm not going to vote no just because of this, if this amendment doesn't pass. But I think, on one side you're talking about, you've got parents who spent a lot of money and they did it before this wasn't a requirement when they signed up. It also wasn't a pandemic when they signed up. So it's like, you gotta kind of go with the flow on this one.
Some people have had a chance to drop out at this point, and they haven't. Right? So they're still in the trip. They're going in with their eyes open.
Okay.
That's kind of my point of, I think the people, Chris did have some individuals who dropped out because they just weren't comfortable going.
Yeah.
I think a few have done that. So I think the people who remain and you know, I'm sure that a number of them are vaccinated. I really don't know. I don't feel like I have good data right now on whether they are or they aren't, some of them.
Yeah.
But I would just say that, you know, I feel like that would be a pretty big step that we haven't taken in any other frame. And that seems to be a really big decision to contemplate.
I would assume that everybody going on this trip knows, I mean, they know that they don't know the vaccination status of the people around them, and they're comfortable with that. So you know, this is absolutely a, you know, a voluntary thing that people want to do. They know that they're going to be around possibly unvaccinated people, vaccinated people. That's their choice, and you know, they can do what they want.
I assume they're not flying a private charter, right? And they're not going to be in a private airport, so they're going to obviously be around people unvaccinated. As long as they're making this choice on their own, I've got absolutely no issue with it.
All right, well, sounds like everyone said their thing. Should we go ahead?
So we'll go ahead and vote. We're voting on the amendment to add the requirement that all participants be vaccinated. All those in favor, we'll have to do this by voice vote. So all those, so a yes vote is adding the requirement to be vaccinated. Beth?
Nay.
Jake?
Nay.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Nay.
I also vote nay. Any further discussion on the original motion to authorize the trip?
I guess I just would say two things. One is, oh, I'm sorry, Beth, go ahead. I'll
That's okay,
follow up
Mark.
after you. Are you sure?
Yeah, totally.
I guess I'd say two things. One, as long as it stays, the State Department stays at 3 or lower, I'm certainly fine with it. If it does go to a level 4, then I think we'd obviously have to revisit that. The other thing I think is worth keeping an eye on is as Brian pointed out, the decision by the Ecuadorian leadership to deploy military and police forces. It seems like, and again, I'm no expert in Ecuadorian geography, but it seems like it's only in part of the country. And if that's right, the part of the country it's being deployed to is the south. And Quito's kind of north central, and it seems like that's where they're flying into, and then they're flying out to the island. So as long as it stays there, then it's probably okay. If that somehow changes, I quite frankly would be more concerned over that than COVID, to be honest with you. So I think that is worth monitoring as well. But right now, I think I'm totally supportive.
Yeah, I think the safety concern is definitely something that we would want to keep an eye on, and I imagine the company is as well. I mean, I'm just looking over the list of level 4s, and I think that's a pretty fluid designation, right? So, I mean, there are a lot of, you know, like Costa Rica's on there. I know Costa Rica's not quite in that area, that's further up, but I guess I wonder, I haven't followed the list to know how long countries stay on or off 3 or 4, but I guess when we'll have to keep an eye on it and ask the company about how they handle if a country becomes a level 4 and what their threshold is. And we can bring that information back to you just so we can maybe have some further discussion, because I guess I don't have a crystal ball to predict, but it seems like a country could become a 4 and then a 3. I mean, we've moved, our country has moved all around. So I think our hope is that families have the opportunity to cancel while they can have less of a penalty to do so. So it sounds like we need to tell them that there still is a chance that we might cancel the trip if conditions move back to the country being deemed level 4.
I mean, to Mark's point, I mean, there's, you know, it's kind of like going into, like, I'm from Buffalo. I know there's certain parts of Buffalo you don't go into, you know, and we're using a company that knows the ins and outs of the country, so they know, where you go and where you don't go. So to that, point, obviously we don't want it to get to that point, but, I think that there's, there's good areas and bad areas of every country and even within cities. So that's, that's why we partner with these people to, keep us out of trouble, so to speak.
I mean, I think there's two reasons countries go on level 4. I was just looking at the list after you said that, Meredith, and you're right. A lot of them are on there because of high COVID rates, including some countries in Europe and other places. And then you're on level 4 because of violence in the country. And so I certainly think if there's violence in the country, that's a conversation that needs to be rehabbed again. If it's a high COVID level, I don't know. I guess if it reaches level 4, I'd still kind of like it to come back to the boards. But personally, if it's a high COVID level, I think I'd have to ask myself, are they higher than the United States right now? And, right now, like Costa Rica is on here, but I'm pretty sure Costa Rica is lower than the United States at the moment. So, if it's a condition in which the United States would have a level 4, I'm not sure I would. Anyway, I would make a distinction between violence and COVID. And if it's COVID, I think I'd have to ask whether it's more dangerous than being in the United States and traveling or not. But
I think that's really fair.
Yeah.
So I was going to say a lot of what everybody said. So just wanted to, that's great. I mean, that's fine. You saved me some talking time. But largely, I think, Meredith answered my question there or shared the concern that I had, as well as Mark, which was, going back to the company and just kind of saying, hey, what happens if this does change to level 4? Because it's also possible some of the families don't know that either, and we don't want them to feel, surprise or anything like that. But yeah, I think COVID is absolutely a concern, but it's not the only one. And, if there's political instability, that, is something we really want to, I would want to discuss more as we get closer if the situation gets worse.
Okay, so I think the, deeper grained intent is clear, and the motion on the table is just to authorize the trip at this time. So we'll go ahead and vote. Beth?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Hopefully it goes off and is a lot of fun and highly educational. Thanks for organizing it, Chris.
And thanks for your time, guys. Thank you.
Next up, we have student recognitions and awards. And again, the kind of context, we're not pushing towards any, policy change to student. There's no specific action on the table. I think it's really just kind of a first conversation. What's the scope of a problem? Is it a problem? If it is a problem, where does it fall? There's always things to work on. Where does it fall on the list of priorities? And what kinds of directions might we be contemplating? And, and then we can follow up as we have, the board, I think, has gotten pretty good about setting goals for itself and following up on the things that we decide are priorities. So at this point, I could almost imagine just a roundtable from each board member, just giving their thoughts on awards and whether we should address it and what directions we might address it if we address it. Anybody want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Okay.
I haven't had any experience with it through my own kids, either negative or positive. I did really like what one of the public comments suggested is a student survey, right? Because we're doing this for the students, it's not for us. So I think that's a great place to start. What do the students think about it? Are they in favor of it? Do they not care for it? Do they, don't care either way? So I'd be really strongly in favor of some kind of, student survey around this topic, and it's kind of a first step, and take it from there.
Great, thanks. Anybody else want to
go? Sure, I'll go. I mean, I agree with, I agree with Jake on the value in a student survey on this. I think that's certainly a step that we should take as we move forward the conversation on this. For me, when I think about kind of the award and recognition process, my thoughts really do first turn to process. I think that it's important that any kind of selection process or criteria for this be knowable, like public, so people know what the criteria are, and that the process be as transparent as possible. I think where things run into difficulty is when the criteria are unclear or subjective even, and that the process is opaque. So I think that's one concern. I also think that the criteria need to be appropriate and clear and objective. So those are the important things for me. So long as those items are met, that the transparent and knowable process, that the criteria are appropriate and objective, then I'm generally supportive of recognition for academic and athletic and artistic achievement. I haven't really seen a lot of downside so long as the things are done properly. So I'm supportive of it, but I do think it'd be valuable to hear what the students have to say because, as Jake pointed out, ultimately, we're doing this. These are student awards and recognition, so it would be valuable to know what they think.
I can go next.
Okay.
So I'll preface this with, I don't know as much about the awards as some of my colleagues here on the board, because I have one child and she just started 6th grade, but I think I'll be getting to know these pretty well. But I have talked to community members kind of casually. This has come up at times before I was on the board. And people who weren't even doing the public comment tonight sharing similar concerns as those who did expressed in the public comment. A question for me that kind of guides my teaching, my mentoring, really any of my work is, what does it mean to belong? And, when we think about kids in particular, especially at the middle and high school level, developmentally, one of the threads in their development is finding their identity and figuring out how they belong in the world. And I think, there are some important things for us to consider around public recognition and public awards, because when they are public, there are questions around what does it mean to belong? And, I just learned now of this donut, what is it called? Donut celebration. And is it really true that the students who earned A's stand up? I actually don't know. So does anybody know that answer? So can anybody, I'm like, I really just don't know.
I can chime in if that's appropriate, Beth.
I'm totally fine with that. Thank you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
About the third quarter last year, I believe it was, we changed our format that students do not any longer stand up to receive those awards. We have an end of the quarter celebration, and we recognize, it's a school-wide celebration, right? We recognize athletics, academic achievement, a variety of things that's appropriate to whatever quarter it is, right? And so beginning third quarter last year, I gave a summary of academic achievement. Like, I'm just making up a number, but 60% of students earned high honors, and 30% earned honor roll, et cetera. Congratulations to those students. And then the awards were given out like privately. Okay, so we switched. So prior to that, in my time here, we did indeed give out, like, if you earn we'd read off the name and the student would receive the certificate. But beginning third quarter, we adjusted that to align with the practice that I just described.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I just didn't know. And I wanted
and the donuts and juice, that's just part of it.
Sure.
It's a nice gesture. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds it. Thank you for clarifying.
Sure, and we also shifted, just to clarify, to grade level celebrations rather than school-wide celebrations. We just thought it was cozier and more appropriate to that type of thing. That's what we thought. So, And the reason we did that was, you know, based on conversations and reflection and reading and all of that about best practice. So there you have it. So
That sounds like a good change already. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Richard.
sure, yeah.
So just to continue my comments then to my colleagues and the public and the staff and so forth who are here, you know, I do want to encourage the board to distinguish perhaps between what it means to recognize achievements and accomplishments, and, you know, how does that align or not with a sense of belonging in a community? Because I think, you know, as some of the public commenters have raised, and I have seen this as a teacher, you know, and I've seen this as a teacher educator, you know, there are times where there are just kids who are left behind, and it's not always on purpose, and they don't feel a sense of belonging. So similar to Jake and Mark, I would really encourage surveying the students. I'd be happy to help develop that survey if that feels like an extra weight for anyone. I'd be happy to do that. I do think and wonder that another piece is that, you know, there's tradition, and traditions can be ways in which people affiliate with a culture or a place. Sometimes because we keep doing what was done in the past, we don't realize that we're leaving people out. And, you know, I can talk about that as a woman, you know, that there are traditions that I wasn't able to be a part of, and still sometimes I'm not able to be a part of. And it's, well, that's the way it was always done, Beth. I just don't think that we want to do that. And I'm not saying that's what's being done. And I don't know enough, but these are questions that I think, especially as we do this equity audit, you know, this is a wonderful time to examine some of our assumptions around public recognition and awards for our student body. So I'm going to pause there. Thanks.
Thanks. I'm happy to go, or you can go.
I'll go if you want to finish up.
Doesn't matter. Go ahead.
You know, I really have no preconceived notion about this. You know, I think that the issue came up, I forget if it was earlier this fall, it first came up.
Last spring.
Last spring, okay. That's right, last spring. I think, you know, yes to everything Beth just said. She's clearly more knowledgeable about the subject than I am, and I'm going to defer to her there. You know, it sounds like there's consensus growing around the student survey. I would certainly support that. I think, you know, one of the comments that one of the speakers during public comment made was, through the reward system or, you know, public recognition system, what are the goals we're trying to accomplish? And are we achieving those in this way? That's a question that I think is a really good question. And again, I don't know. I would just be very interested to have the board look at if there is strong educational research around recognition practices and the effects those have. I think that that should guide our decision-making on this. And it sounds like from Richard's comments that maybe that process is already ongoing to some degree. And I think that's wonderful. And thank you for doing that. But to me, that's kind of where this should be headed, rather than just relying on the way things have always been done.
Okay. I mean, I agree with a lot of things that have been said. I think 2 points that haven't been said is, you know, we're just having a lump of awards, but of course we have lots of different kinds of awards. I think I heard attendance awards maybe especially singled out, but you know, student of the month are different than book awards, are different than team awards on a sports team, or you know, honor roll awards, and you know, so not saying any, which are better or worse, but I think it is possible that we can keep some and get rid of some. So I want to just put that on the table. I also, the other thing I haven't heard is age appropriateness, or, you know, maybe some people are saying it's not appropriate at any age, and very open to that too. But I think awards for kindergartners have a very different feel than awards for, you know, upper level high school students who are about whether they're going to college or entering the workforce, are about to enter a fairly competitive environment, and in which case having some awards on their CV or resume or college application, you know, can be a benefit as well as the downside. So
And the experience of having to compete, right?
and the experience of having to compete, which is not going to go away when they graduate from high school. It's going to intensify. Whether that should be the way society is structured or not is a whole deeper conversation, but it certainly is the way society is structured. So I think, so in addition to not necessarily having to treat all awards with one brush, I also think it's important to say we can treat ages with a different brush as well. And I think that's probably, for me, part of where I would come down is I think there's some age where some level of awards that are very carefully, you know, thought out in terms of intention and process probably are appropriate and helpful, and some ages where they're probably not appropriate. And I don't know if we're setting that pretty much right now. I think they mostly start to kick in middle school, but you know, it's an interesting conversation. What is the right age for awards to start to kick in? I do think it's a responsibility of the district that we're reflective about this, and we have a reason we're doing this, right? Other than tradition, that we have a purpose and an intent behind awards. And I think, like Mark said, I think process is super important. Just among those awards that we were talking about, I think I've heard comments, some of these, you know, have some of the awards, I think people have more questions about the process and fairness, and other awards people don't. And the last thing I'll say is I feel really strongly, you know, it's right here in our student growth and achievement values, growth of the whole student, social, emotional, physical, creative, aesthetic, as well as intellectual. So to me, it's really important that we don't treat, let's say, sports awards different from intellectual awards, different from social good citizen awards, different from arts awards, right? I would feel pretty strongly about, as some districts do, keeping sports awards and getting rid of academic awards. I think it's important that we treat all of those in a balanced way. So I guess those are my thoughts. It's not not necessarily a super clear answer. I did take 4 notes of possible next actions. Student survey, which sounds like a winner to me. I think all the board members spoke in support of that. You know, Mark's statement about transparency and appropriateness. Yeah, I got asked by somebody, I don't even know what all the awards are in the district, and you know, maybe it's work for somebody, and that's the next conversation, is where does this fit into a busy work schedule. But maybe we should have a list of all the awards and what the process is for each one of those awards. You know, we do have an equity survey coming up. I think it's probably appropriate for the award discussion and the equity discussion to have some intersection. And you know, another one, well, it's come up, but I don't know if we, you know, again, this comes back to capacity and priority, but I don't think it would be the worst thing for the curriculum committee to spend 15 minutes talking about why are we giving these awards? What's the goal? What's the intent behind this? And just see if we can articulate it. If we can't articulate it, that tells us something. And if we can articulate it with a common purpose, sounds like we have done a poor job of communicating that to the community, at least. So that's an opportunity. So then you get to the conversation of, you know, I opened the whole meeting by saying, I know it's a grinding kind of year. Everybody is feeling underwater. And we already, last spring, when we thought maybe we'd be a little bit less under the heel of COVID, we set 6 goals, and we're already having conversations about, you know, are we going to make all 6, or do we have to let a couple go, given how much has been going on this year? So that to me is the issue. I don't have any doubt that it would be a good thing for this district to proceed and engage in this conversation. I just am less clear where it fits into our bandwidth and capacity. The equity survey is A, super important, and B, already deeply committed to. the construction, dealing with COVID, or those are three things that, in my mind, we can't take back off our plate. So I'm less, seems to me like it's something that needs to happen. I'm just less clear whether it's something we can do this year or if it's something we need to, maybe it's something that goes on the board goals for next year. So I don't have a super strong thought about that. I don't know if anybody else does or not.
Well, I would like to weigh in.
Yeah.
As has been noted, we have made some adjustments, and I appreciate the advocacy that some who spoke tonight have engaged with us around this topic, because it's really helped us kind of put up a mirror to some of these long-standing traditions in our schools to think about why are we doing this, what are the purposes of these, and balancing the benefit from some of the concerns that are being expressed about how they are maybe not beneficial to some of our students. And as Richard cited, I think the middle school is the place that feels like that's where the change happens, when there starts to, the award system really begins there in the way that's been discussed tonight. And I think the middle school has engaged in a lot of reflection about some of their practices. And I think it's just been a starting point, though, right, in what's probably a process. Because I do think there are probably, there's certainly more work to be done. As we were talking about this discussion as an administrative team, we wondered what the recognitions and awards, what place do they, how are they valued in our community? How are they valued by our students? And I think a survey does help discover more about that. Because I think as, I can't remember who said it, but certainly the students who get awards would think positively about them. And perhaps even their parents think positively about them, or parents who maybe have a certain frame about achievement might have certain thoughts about awards and the importance of those and the value of those. But I think we're just making assumptions around that. So I think a student survey, and I appreciate your offer of help with that, Beth, that would be tremendous to have some assistance in crafting, a survey that is specific to our context here. And that's something that would work with middle and high school age students. I do worry about the timing of that, and not worry, but just want to think about the timing of it in terms of getting a good response rate to something like this that we want to use as a kind of launching point for further decision making. And I don't think that timing is right now, but I think some space from, we've just done a big survey push in the high school around Nuia. We're about to do another survey district-wide around equity. So, looking at after the first of the year to figure out a timing for a student survey and maybe what's some next steps. I also really like to discuss the idea about a curriculum committee discussion, because that's a cross-school stakeholder committee that can just grapple with some of these issues. And I think as an administrative team, we see some more opportunities in our field of vision right now to begin working on around this topic. So, I think it's good to kind of have some open discussion and thinking about this. And I think, no one on the staff is in this business to harm kids, certainly. That's not what anyone here is about. So certainly that's not what we want to be doing. I think it's not as easy as saying, this is harmful, let's get rid of it. I don't think it's that easy and simple. But I do think it's something that we need to collect more data on, determine if there are short-term changes right now that we see that could be made to especially around the criterion and the transparency around that, is something that we see some opportunity for some changes, some next steps really with the conversation with staff. And then also, I think Jen said it, just more communication across school around I think Brian called them book awards. They're called different things at different levels, but just to ensure that it doesn't feel like, you know, the same child getting the same awards every teacher that comes up and every year the same thing happens. So I think those are the things that we see opportunities right now to, you know, be able to make some, have some discussion around how we can adjust that.
Thanks, Meredith. I also want to add that in preparation for tonight's meeting, I attempted to find like peer-reviewed literature and scholarship on best practices when it comes to public recognition awards. And there was not really anything out there. So at least that I could find, maybe I was using the wrong keywords. The only thing I could find where there are any studies relates to attendance awards and how they actually, at least I can share this study, you know, with the board, how they actually cause pretty much the negative results that they kind of intend to do. So I don't know. And again, I'm saying this, I don't know yet if we have perfect attendance awards. I can tell you as someone with chronic illness and with a child with chronic illness, like I can't do perfect attendance. I couldn't as a kid, and I usually can't at work. So, you know, it's not because I'm not motivated and not because I don't care and, you know, not because of other maybe positive adjectives, but that's not related to the particular study I found, but it is a piece that connects to perfect attendance awards. Again, if we have them, I have a lot to learn around this space, and I appreciate everybody who's helping me learn tonight outside of this, and also, you know, as Meredith said, kind of holding up a mirror. It's, you know, it's especially this year when it's particularly challenging to hold up a mirror or anything, to hold up anything. So thanks.
I would just, you know, you mentioned the primary literature, which thanks for doing that. I took a look at policies. You know, there's basically no policies, not just in Maine, but across the country on awards for school districts. So maybe it's a cutting edge topic. I don't say that at all to say that we shouldn't be exploring it, but there's not a lot of models out there that we could quickly adopt. This is something I think we're going to have to think through in a substantive fashion on our own process. Patrick, did you have something to?
I just had a quick question, because I really don't want to get bogged down in this right now. I know we have a lot of other work to do tonight. Do we have perfect attendance awards in our district?
I would have to defer to the principals as to what they do at each building on that.
Do we, was the question, do we have perfect attendance? Is that what I heard?
Awards for that in this district, I guess would be a question I have.
We have given out attendance awards at the middle school. Yes, we have at the end of the year.
We don't at the high school.
That for me would just be like a little bit of a red flag, unless there's already some accommodation for like religious practice, because I know personally, I remember that in high school 1,000 years ago and thinking to myself, wow, anyone who ever misses school for religious holidays is never going to get that award. And in fact, that was the case. It was like really if you were part of the dominant religion that the school holiday schedule was formed around, you were eligible for that award. So that kind of surprised me that even came up at this point, but that's one for, I think, for immediate consideration. It's just to look at that.
Also in the health context of the present day.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, you had to quarantine.
Yeah.
I can say at ASA, we didn't last year. I don't know what past practice has been though.
Thanks.
And in case you guys didn't hear me, we haven't in the high school since I've been there. This is my 8th year, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think just getting a list of current award practices would be a constructive thing to do. Hopefully it could just be a Google Doc. Wouldn't, I bet the three principals could produce it in 15 minutes. Wouldn't have to be a big time sink, but it might be worthwhile. Were you trying to speak, Beth?
I was, but it's good now. Thanks.
Okay.
Actually, you know what I will say? I think, you know, yes, COVID might help us revisit like perfect attendance, but you know, as Patrick said, there's religious reasons and people have chronic health issues, you know, and when we think about that social emotional health, I mean, they need those. There are things outside of kids and adults' lives control whereby they can't get perfect attendance. You know, I can think of death. I can think of so many things that, you know, I think we can attend to and perhaps think about that, maybe award a little bit more, a little sooner than the other ones. You know, and I appreciate the reflective work that the administration is doing, you know, in each of the buildings to think about all of these awards on top of, like I said, everything else.
I do want to add, we did move, just for the record, we did move away from that the last 2 years, and COVID was the, so but that has been a tradition here. I will say that. So.
All right, as Patrick noted, we do have plenty of other things on the agenda, so are people ready to move on? And I would again like to thank the public for their thoughts, clearly stimulating a lot of thinking and process, which is good. So next up, we have the Mesbah Resolutions. This is basically where you know, so the document is up here under Mesbah Resolutions. So basically, there's a meeting this Saturday morning, coming Saturday, for the Mesbah delegates to vote. And what this really is, they're doing it a little differently this time. Last time it was really presented as specific resolutions, but really what those resolutions are doing is there's an underlying policy statement, which is the position statement of Mesbah. And Mesbah through MSMA, it's a joint organization with the superintendents, hires basically, they wouldn't use this word, they'd probably call it government relations, but it's basically a full-time lobbyist who spends time working at the legislature to advocate for these positions. And her being able to go back to this document and saying this is an officially voted on position by the school boards across the state is a helpful thing. So the way somebody, whoever was in charge of policy subcommittee at the Mesbah level this year clearly took on the role a little more detail, and they actually come through the entire document and they're presenting a number of proposed changes. They're cleaning up things that have gone off the books as on issues and things like that. But I'll just walk through quickly. And when I do this, I'll walk through and people should just shout out and interrupt me if there's something that they want to discuss in particular, I guess if they disagree with the proposed position from the policy committee, Mesbah. So regional service centers was a thing back 5-10 years ago about trying to basically concentrate services to save money. Districts were pretty strongly opposed to it, that push. And at one point there was a financial hook attached to participate in regional service centers. That's gone away. So they're just updating by removing that. There's an addition to the school board training, getting specific about, there's always been a statement that school boards should be well trained. This is getting specific about what school boards should be well trained in, including equity of educational opportunity, training and freedom of access, which is already required by law in this state, but and by policy in this district. Explanation of Mesbah, so training about Mesbah, training about school board governance, parliamentary procedures, school board self-evaluation, onboarding a school board. You can read the list, but there's getting specific about training, curriculum policy, basically putting in addition for in-person and remote instructional opportunities. Really just a wording correction on 3B, 3E.
Did you say to stop you?
Stop me if you want to talk about something.
Yeah, I do want to go to that curriculum policy one.
Yep.
I quite honestly generally don't like boxing ourselves in if we don't need to. And I realize that these are just recommendations and they're not binding, but I quite honestly would rather just leave the current policy as it is, which stops reflecting the best interests of the students in the community, period. I would, so in this particular instance, I would not support the addition of that language.
Yeah, it kind of, there was a related resolution that came up.
Really have no idea at this point, but again.
Yeah, there was a related resolution that came up last year that was really, I think some board members here, and I was on the fence, but I was sympathetic. That was kind of normalizing remote instruction, which, you know, we need remote instruction. We've used it already here, and I'm sure with snow days, we may use it again. And there's other, you know, we can't rule out that we'll use it because of COVID. We spent the fall trying to get plans in place for COVID. So, but I do kind of dislike or have some concern about how this normalizes and putting remote instruction on an equal footing with in-person instruction. We're not going to get rid of it. We need to prepare for it, but it's one thing to say add additional funding to be prepared for remote instruction. It's another thing to say everything that you do in curriculum should be parallel for in-person and remote. I don't know if other board members have a thought on that.
I guess, you know, I hear what you're saying very much, Mark, and I wonder how much this was meant to be the equivalent of, you know, have an emergency kit ready in case there's a tornado. You know, it's like, just make sure you're ready in case something happens. And this is a way of saying, please just make sure you're ready. And that was kind of how I read it at first, but I also hear what you're saying about the more vague the language is, the more wiggle room you have. Like, I get that. So I could go either way on this, but I guess I'm not opposed to it. When I think about it, like the be prepared type statement, and here they're saying like, and don't forget about floods. You know, like you got your tornado kit, but don't forget about floods. You know, that's kind of the way I read it.
I mean, and just, this is why I listen to you and take it forward. I don't, you know, some boards, they vote to tell their delegate how to vote. And then these delegates get really flustered because they get there and there's a discussion that changes the interpretation, or there's an amendment that changes, and then they don't feel like they're authorized. So that's what I'm doing, is I'm just listening to the intent of the board, and based on the conversation and the changes, I'll vote. But I don't think it's what you can choose to do it, but I don't recommend that you send me with specific instructions on how to vote on each of these things, just because they are fluid. 3A3, administrator shortage. I don't know how much creating a leadership academy would help, but it can't hurt. Do you have any thought on that, Meredith?
Can't hurt.
Yeah.
We've certainly seen the need for more applicants in our applicant pools. They've been, you know, we've been lucky, but
yeah.
Yes.
Especially if the legislature is going to pay for it.
Right.
That's the missing piece for a lot of these. You know, either turn into a mandate on the DOE that's unfunded, or they turn into a mandate on the districts that are unfunded. And those are totally different than if they're funded. Student absenteeism. This is one of the bigger changes. Much more strongly worded statement about absenteeism and a target goal of 95%, and districts needing to take active activity to ensure that we reach that 95% attendance target. I don't think that includes excused absences, but you know, there's also been a state law change in this area that's getting stronger on preventing absenteeism. So to me, that's uncontroversial.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Does that, so does that 95%, would remote instruction, kind of work on your own type of remote instruction, be counted as being present? So, you know, like someone's sick or something happens and they're not going to be in school for 2 weeks, but they're sent home with a quarantine packet, that counts as being present towards that 95%?
That's what our plan is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's district by district,
Okay.
really how that's done.
Okay. Thanks. That's just my question.
Multiple pathways, it's really just a language change. If this is referencing things like our core programs, and also multiple pathways to graduation, which we have in our graduation policy. So our district's already doing that. I think that's a good idea. Teacher evaluation, this is new. I'm sorry, it's replacing some older language, but it's updating it to a shorter, more focused, but probably stronger statement about teaching evaluation being important. And then the last two are natural points of tension between boards and teacher collective bargaining units. But these have both, these are both bills that were basically tabled in the legislature. They went into the legislature, one of them came out. I think it was 2 years that it came out, and the governor vetoed it, but they came back up in the legislature again this year. And they did not pass out of the legislature, but they're tabled, meaning they could come back and they could come back again. So one of them pertains to anytime the union and the board can't agree, there can be binding arbitration on insurance and salary. The position that Mesbah is proposing is that school board should have the final say on budgets. And if you turn, since these are 70–80% of the costs, if you turn that over to an arbitrator, basically you have one person who doesn't live in the district deciding salaries and budgets and therefore taxes for the district. Right to strike, same kind of issue. Obviously, there's a collective bargaining position in place that we have to collectively bargain, and we want to collectively bargain. But whether teachers are considered essential workers that can't strike or not, currently they cannot strike, and there's a law on the books to allow teachers to strike, and the Mesbah board is recommending a position to prevent strikes. Bargaining immediately. Yes.
Can we pause there?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
I will say, I adamantly do not support legislation that would prohibit any union from striking. Yes, it's disruptive. Teachers don't do it on a whim. It's likely not going to happen, but I am in a union, so that's my position.
Just tap that screen. Thanks.
Thanks, Beth. Anybody else on that one?
Yeah, I guess my question there is, it kind of seems like those two are like a really big power play combo.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you're not allowed to strike, but you also can't enter into binding arbitration. I mean, it's like, come on, like how anti-labor is that going to be? Put those two together. It's like really piling on.
Well, so with neither of these in place, what teachers do have is that they get their steps. So right now, under current Maine law, if there's no agreement, they continue to go forward, they continue to get paid, they continue to get their seniority bumps.
Okay.
They don't get any sort of cost of living or non-step based back, but there are other ways in which the law, the laws, I don't want to say do favor teachers. That some employees don't necessarily have, that there is basically in place that, so if there's no agreement right now with no binding arbitration and no right to strike, what happens is the school year goes ahead, the teachers get their steps, but they have to compromise and come to negotiation to get cost of living increase.
But there are a set number of steps, right? Like the steps aren't infinite. So teachers who have maxed out on those steps don't get an increase, don't get a, so the steps apply to a certain group of teachers, but not all of them.
You know what the percentage is, Meredith? 2/3 of our teachers are on steps and 1/3 are at the top, or?
It's closer to that than the reverse. I don't have it in my head. So.
Okay, yeah.
I guess my question for this would be, in other industries where you're considered an essential worker and you're not allowed to strike, is there also a ban on binding arbitration?
I think it varies. State employees were, they did get the right to strike, but prior to that, they also had a ban, I believe, on binding arbitration and right to strike.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in a union, but, and as a school board member, there's that fiscal tension, right? You don't want to agree to something that's going to bankrupt the district. On the same side, it's just kind of like, if you're telling someone they're an essential worker and they can't strike, but you're also telling them they just have to take what you give them, that seems, I just don't feel comfortable with that, with both of those playing in tandem.
No, you're right. They do play off each other. You know, the counter argument is they get steps, which in many labor situations they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, between the two, I feel stronger about the arbitration. I think that there are constitutional issues that some person in a suit sitting in Portland, Maine, listens to two sides and then literally sets the taxes for the town of Orono.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of issues with binding arbitration.
Yeah.
But I also think that if you're not going to have binding arbitration, I mean, I don't think in this school district this is an issue, but I could imagine a district where they're just like, okay, and now we're going to cut everyone's salaries by 2/3. Whatever the extreme thing would be, I can envision a scenario where you would want people to have the ability to go on strike.
I don't disagree. Your scenario can't happen.
Right.
Because
that was an extreme example.
You
I'm
know,
saying I can't foresee everything.
teachers don't have to agree to a collective bargaining agreement that cuts a salary. They would get
Just continue
current
under the
salary and
existing
steps.
contract. Expired.
So that's what you're weighing is, you know, current salary and steps, enough of a compensation to keep the schools open, or is that weakening the position so much that you're willing to let the schools shut down? I feel less strongly about that one, but I can pretty much predict that it's going to pass at the Mesbah level, but I'm here to represent the district, so I'm just listening to the district.
I really feel like it's such a deficit mind view of teachers. I'm gonna, you know, I just feel like, you know, teachers are professionals. Let's teach them, let's treat them like professionals. And I know in this district we do, and I'm so proud that we do. But like, this is the type of policy document that has ramifications for the entire profession. You know, we're already dealing, I could really go on a soapbox right now, but, you know, I think, you know, I would encourage us to think about, do teachers feel like they're supported here? And I think generally they would say yes. This document, like Patrick has pointed out, that 1-2 punch, like that is removing the professionalism from teachers. And I don't know any teacher union that would strike at the drop of a hat. Like, teachers don't want to not teach. So the fact, like, I also feel like that's just not understood here, and that's not represented here. And I really am very uncomfortable with a view of teachers as like cogs instead of as the professionals they are. And this policy document would constitute a view of teachers as a very deficit mindset. And I hope that other districts will see it that way too. I mean, that's, I'm so displeased.
Well, you raise an interesting point, right? This is a statewide policy ultimately intended to affect a statewide law. And, you know, just, you know, if teachers are treated well in this district, and I'm sure there's conversation on that too, but hopefully we try to. But yeah, there are certainly places where teachers are badly underpaid in the state, across the state. But okay, any other comments? Yep. I think that was the end, but
there's on to learning support.
Oh, sorry. Yep, learning support and dropout prevention. So hopefully you had time to read these. I don't want to read the whole thing, but any thoughts on the learning? These are new additions to the document.
I like the learning support because it says we want more funding. Let's do this, you know, so
Yep.
great.
Yeah, it's hard to argue against learning support when we're getting new funding.
Yeah.
And
And dropout prevention seems reasonable.
yep. Any other positions or anything anybody wants to go back to? Okay, so that's it on resolutions. I'll give you an update when we get there about what the final votes were. COVID discussion, Meredith.
So I would just say that our pool testing participation is stabilized, really. We have a trickle in effect, you know, from week to week happening with more signups, but it's really stabilizing quite a bit. And we do have, you know, someone on board who's working a couple of days a week, who's helping enormously to really organize that program. Rachel's still doing, you know, quite a bit with the helping some of the background data, but it's helpful to have someone kind of organizing all of that on the day of testing and before testing. So we're really pleased with how that's emerging. And the case rates, you know, our cases, probably you feel like you still get a lot of emails from me, the public maybe feels like that, but it has really slowed down for us, and that's been really helpful to see. And I know there's just a lot I can't, you know, I really draw a line on how much details to give about cases we do have, but we still, I can still say that we're not seeing school transmission. I mean, with our contact tracing and our investigation, that's not what we're seeing happening. And, you know, I think it was 2 weeks ago, our pool test didn't reveal any. Last week, we had one positive result from pool testing. So, you know, we're picking things up with pool testing that would otherwise be undetected. This case last week was asymptomatic. So it's really doing what we want it to do. And, you know, I was in a webinar with Dr. Shaw this week. He spoke to the superintendents around the state. And, you know, there's some optimism with what they're seeing in the numbers. And we really feel like with the upcoming, you know, hopeful authorization of the vaccinations for 5 through 11, that will begin to feel like a corner around which there's you know, feel like we are really turning a corner. And we had 78 signups as interested in that 5 through 11 clinic, which is really strong. So Karen's working now to figure out, you know, how we can, you know, schedule clinics to make it available, because if 78 have signed up, I guarantee there are more than that would actually participate if we had the clinic. So she's working on that. She rescheduled the vaccination clinic that had to be canceled on the day we canceled, had remote and this on-site school last week. And so that's scheduled for, I think, tomorrow. So we appreciate her ongoing efforts with that for sure. Really, I think the main discussion that Brian and I talked about having tonight under this topic is around winter sports. And it's pretty clear that there are no guidelines for COVID precautions coming from anyone above, not from the state, not from NPA, in any kind of specificity other than what we already have. And so around the state, regions, and sometimes superintendent regions, sometimes like MPA regions are taking up the effort to work on more regionalized guidelines so that, you know, you have some assurance that teams you're playing against or interacting with have a kind of a base common set of guidelines. Our region's kind of tricky with that. We're a pretty diverse region in terms of, you know, types of communities in the Penquist region, which serves Penobscot and Piscataquis counties. But we're going to try to develop, see if we can develop something. We're going to have a meeting about that later this week. So tonight I really wanted to hear from the board kind of what your thoughts were on this. I can tell you that most of the regions, the biggest topic that's being discussed is masking. And then secondary to that is really thinking about spectators and any parameters around either numbers or, you know, really numbers and who can attend. And then there are some other groups that are mentioning things just around encouraging full testing, encouraging vaccination, doing things like not serving concessions so that people stay masked, just little things like that. So I think the big topic that I wanted to hear from the board tonight is around the masking topic for our indoor sports, actually, because I think cross-country skiing is outdoors, and I would presume we would continue in the way we've done outdoor sports this fall. But it just feels different to me. We have universal masking requirements during the school day, and it seems important to continue those as long as they are a requirement for us during the day, to be, at least for now, in our sports program indoors. But I think this is the way most of the conversations have, where they've ended up, as I've heard from a couple of regions around the state and where they are. That's really the piece that's the common thread. And then most everything else is kind of based on local factors, like, you know, our gym's different than, you know, other gyms, like Brewer's Gym has 2 sides, ours has 1 side. And so everyone has different facility limitations in terms of things like fans and spectators. But the masking, I think, is where most districts are wanting to see some discussion. So turn that over to hear some feedback.
Thoughts from the board? I mean, I would just note CDC guidelines definitely moot sports going forward. I don't think they particularly single out masks, so I think the indoor-outdoor distinction probably does. I mean, I don't single out masks in the sports context, so the indoor-outdoor distinction that they make probably carries through into the sports. They also make a distinction between low, medium, and high-risk sports. So wrestling is a high-risk sport. All of our winter sports are medium and low risk. So basketball and hockey are medium risk sports. So they only say you should recommend testing. So their main intervention other than masks is testing. And so they say we recommend testing for intermediate level sports. I think they say you should require it for high risk sports, but indoor high risk sports. But so, I mean, I certainly can get on board with what you're saying. I think it pretty much follows the CDC guidelines, which has stood us in good stead. So indoor sports need masks. Unfortunately, I don't say that lightly. I know for the student athletes, that's a big deal. But I think we need to go there. And I think recommending testing and recommending vaccinations makes a lot of sense. I also, you know, clearly our community is in a different place in their choices to go to events, and it is a choice as a parent or as a student not participating to go to an event. So I'm comfortable with opening that. As I told you, Meredith, I have a little discomfort when I imagine an Orono Old Town basketball game where every seat in the gym is full for an hour and a half, even if we're wearing masks. So I might support a capacity limit. I don't have a super strong number on that, 50%, 75%. 50% is probably the number I would pick, but that's really the only thing I would add. You know, I'll just say it, this time a year ago, I was really hesitant about sports going ahead. I think in the end, I voted for most sports to go ahead, but I voted against some sports going ahead, and I think I was wrong. You know, I know one year of data is not the ultimate amount of data, but just looking back, I think the benefits have outweighed the cost pretty clearly. So definitely think we need to find a way to make sports go ahead this year.
So Meredith, am I hearing you correctly that regionally we're looking to come up with some universal mandate in the region, specifically in regards to our athletes and specifically in regard to masking? Is that right? Because we had situations last year, right, where and maybe not in the winter, but I think we had situations in the fall where masked athletes were playing against non-masked athletes, correct?
That happened early in the fall before really kind of everyone.
Yeah. Is that what MPA is trying to avoid? Or I shouldn't say MPA.
MPA
I
is
guess.
not behind that.
Correct. I guess it's just our region, right?
Yeah, I think, the conversations I've been in, most districts are feeling like, if our district is a universal mask district and we're doing that, we're requiring that at our facility, we don't really want to go and play your team. That's not. It seems, unfair. And if our district has that policy, are we going to go to your gym where you don't and have our students wear masks, your students aren't? And, the MPA has said, according to Mike, that's not, if we refuse to play a team over that, it's not going to be a loss. It's just you're not playing that game. I do think that we did a survey in last week's PenQuest meeting, and it was almost unanimous that everyone supported the masking requirement. And I think the one person that didn't vote for it didn't vote no and just said, uncertain based on what the community their board would want to do around that. So, I think that's the other nuance to it, that locally we would have to decide that if there are teams around us that aren't, and I'm not sure there will be, we would play them. But at a basic level, I think first we need to have some consensus on where we stand on mask requirements for winter sports, indoor winter sports.
I think we have requirements already in place right now, don't we? I mean, we've got a masking policy. It would indicate that if you're playing sports indoors, you would need to be wearing a mask. I think what you're talking about sounds really good, that I wouldn't want our student athletes to go to a gym where there's poor ventilation and not just the opposing team, but the opposing team's fans are not required to wear masks. I wouldn't want our students to go anywhere where there wasn't a masking policy for everyone inside the gym. And then, as Brian said, capacity limits, you're looking at ventilation. Vaccination does change things a lot from last year, right? I mean, that's a huge difference from last year. But then Delta changed things again because, like I said, I've got personal experience with fully vaccinated people who have been quarantining from work because of COVID. So I think I wouldn't want to see our policy rolled back at all, and I wouldn't want to see us attending events at places where there's not a universal masking policy, and especially if that doesn't count as a loss. I think that's really important.
Other thoughts?
Brian, I'm trying to find the current CDC guidance regarding sports in particular level of risk, and I don't believe any. I know that the main CDC eliminated the level of risk categorization of sports.
So
I don't believe that the federal CDC guidance does anymore either. I think they stopped doing that in December. Unless I'm mistaken, I'm trying to find it right now.
no, they definitely have been pulling back on the degree of recommendation around sports from the CDC. But if you go to the K-12 school,
Yeah, that's where I am right now.
and if you just search on the word sports, the only place it comes up is in the context of testing. They still have a table of low, intermediate, and high risk versus level of community spread, and then what they say you should be doing in terms of testing.
Right.
And high risk sports and high levels of community spread, they should say you should be mandating testing. But that's it. I agree. That's the only place where they have a low, medium, high. And unhelpfully, because they've gotten rid of the low, medium, high, they've you have to go back to an old document to know what used to be low, medium, high, but they do still reference low, medium, high, I think, in that document, in that one
I'll
place.
see if I can find it, because it was buried like in a link in the document, and you had to.
The state has made it clear that they are no longer, those have been eliminated and they are no longer referencing those. I mean,
yeah, the CDC's changed. For a while, there was a sports link, and then it took you off to an NCAA PDF.
The federal CDC sports link is now an archive page. It hasn't been updated since December of 2020.
Yeah. Yeah, the only place I know from the CDC is if you go to like the CDC school COVID guidelines.
Yeah, that's right. I'm looking. Okay.
I mean, this one, it says you should be doing testing. I think it said before events for unvaccinated participants, right? It differentiates here between vaccinated and unvaccinated with testing.
I found it. There are two links I have in here, and on one link I can find certain things, on the other I can find another. Let's see what this one stated. This one was updated August.
Let me post the link in the chat.
And it has a table, table 1, this one's about testing recommendations, and in this it cites high-risk sports and activities, and then gives low-risk sports activities and what examples of those are.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, that's the only place I know that that distinction still is referenced.
I mean, I'm not the world's biggest supporter of masking, as anyone who watches these meetings recognizes. On the other hand, I do recognize also that masking is effective, and the research is pretty solid behind that. I have a hard time being in support of rolling back a mandatory masking for sporting events if we're not rolling it back during the school day, right? That wouldn't seem to me to make a whole lot of sense and be terribly consistent. My biggest goal is to make sure that sports are allowed to go forward as fully and as safely as possible. If that means that our athletes have to wear masks, then so be it. They wore masks last winter and were able to do so with, a little bit of adapting time. But I think that the kids were just happy to be able to compete. And if we're going to have mandatory masks during the school day, I find it hard to exempt that during athletic competition. In terms of competing against schools that have a mask optional policy, I think that's a tougher question for me. It's easy to say that you wouldn't want to do that during the regular season, right? Especially if it's not going to count against as a loss on this team's record. What happens when you get to a playoff situation, right? What if you refuse to participate? Something would have to give on that instance, right? And I'd hate to be in a position where one of our teams had to forfeit because we had a policy in place that said you can't play a team from a school where the policy is mask optional. So I think I'd want to think about that more at this point. I think the most difficult question for me is probably spectators, right? Because the last thing I would want to require our administrators to do, or whoever the administrator is at a particular athletic event, is to enforce mask policy on a crowd of 200 or 300 people in the gym, right? I would not want to put you or Mike or Sam or Meredith or Richard or Steve Van Dolman in a position like that. That being said, I do think that not allowing spectators last year was a problem, right? And I think vaccination has changed the game on that. What the proper answer to that is, I don't know. Is it a vaccination requirement to attend? You have to show your card to get in. I don't know. Is it you get warned if you're not wearing a mask, and the second time you get escorted out? I don't know how practical that is. Brian mentioned a cap on crowd size.
That's even harder to.
That's even harder to do. And if we're going to do something like that, do we then also give priority to certain groups? Do we prioritize parents? Do we prioritize students? Because a huge part of the athletic experience is students coming to watch their peers and cheer them on, and that's a huge part of sports in Oregon, for sure. We were both at the girls' soccer game tonight, and one of the things that I know the girls were disappointed about tonight was that the boys' soccer team had to play a makeup game and couldn't be there to cheer them on the same way the girls couldn't be at the boys game last night, senior game for both of them. So that's a huge concern here. I don't know, I don't have the answers to that, but I think it's a pretty complicated set of questions. And I am certainly not, I personally am not in a position to make any kind of a, not only not a decision, but even a recommendation on that. I mean, mask mandatory, they stay mandatory during the school day. Yep, I'm okay with that. Beyond that, I don't know that I'm have anything other that I'm solid on, other than I'm pretty solid that sports have to be allowed to go forward.
Are you okay with requiring students to wear masks, but not requiring spectators to wear masks?
No, I
mean, I get the enforcement issue, but there's just a real...
I just don't know how we do it. I don't like that idea, right? I don't like the idea of we're making the kids have them, but you can come in and watch and get away with not having them. How we do it though, you know, I mean, I don't want to have to make Meredith or Mike go around. I don't know that they could do that. I mean, they could go around and say something. What if someone says no?
Well, that's what some of the, I think, regional benefit is, that if we all come up with the same rule on masks, that it's
Same expectations.
right. It's everyone's fans know the rules, and whether you're playing in Orono or Old Town, we're requiring masks, if that's what we come up with.
Do you think you'll be able to get to that point?
Well, I mean, that's what these other two regions have come up with.
We're pretty diverse though, as you pointed out.
Well, one of these other regions is from the far north and one is from the far south, and they've both come to that agreement.
Okay, if we can do that, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, if we can't come to that agreement, then, you know, I think we have to question whether or not we're going to play those schools, but it's complicated, as you point out. And, you know, that's where I wish MPA would come up with tournament. I think they have to have some consistent rules that, you know, apply for tournament play. But, you know, so far they're not doing that, and that's a complicated scenario or situation that is playing out at the state level. But, you know, I'm optimistic that we'll be able to come up with a common set of guidelines, because, you know, honestly, I think that there's power in the region, the majority of the region saying this is what we're going to do. And, you know, those communities where you have split communities, it helps those communities, you know, not turn against each other, but kind of just go along with the region. So maybe I'm wearing my rose-colored glasses, but I'm hopeful that it can lead to that. You know, I think other communities have had much more controversy around that, and I think if we can do this as a region, actually, I think helps those communities not kind of be divisive within themselves. But in terms of spectators, you know, I don't want any of us in our staff to have to be the police of this, but we just have to, right? And people just have to understand that, you know, if you're not going to comply and you refuse, then we will call the police. I mean, that's just what it is. Like, you know, you're a guest here, you don't have to be here, you're not going to stay if you're not going to comply by our rules. And, you know, I think we're going to have signage, but I really don't anticipate big problems with that, because I think people want to come watch basketball, right? They want to come watch their kids play hockey. They want to come to this. They didn't get to do these things last year, and I think they're really going to value being able to do them, even if there are some parameters that are undesirable with masking. So
I think it's going to be basketball is what's going to be the problem, right? Because if you talk about something like hockey, or you talk about something like indoor track, no schools have those facilities. So you're going to be governed by the rules of the facility, right? If you're playing at the Alphon for a hockey game, you're governed by university main rules. Same thing at the field house.
sure your vaccination card or your test.
Yeah, and if for any event over 250 people, right? So you're governed by those rules. We have smaller sports. I mean, same thing with I mean, some schools have pools, but, you know, swimming and diving don't draw huge crowds. I mean, for whatever reason, you know, basketball is the thing in the winter in Maine, right? And it attracts, you know, hundreds of people per game. And then when the tournament comes, if it comes this year, I mean, we're talking major economic impact on the towns that are, you know, able to host tournament games. I'm not worried if let's say we were, not that we have a pool, but if let's say we had a pool and you had 50 people at a swim meet, you know, you or Mike or whomever going around saying, hey, put your mask on and you gotta leave. What about the situation Brian describes, the Orono Old Town basketball game, where it's packed to the gills? Are you gonna have every administrator on duty that night with, you know, a couple of OPD officers at the door? That's probably what we need to have for that particular game.
Oh, we already do have an OPD officer, right, because of the size of the cash box.
True.
And you know, that's also where the capacities come in. You know, if the air is stale, you shouldn't be breathing it with COVID.
Yeah.
And those are the events where the air gets stale by the end of a, you know, by the end of a game, and you're sitting up in the, especially in the upper bleachers, you can smell the sweat in that room.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't really be breathing the COVID. So, and that helps with your enforcement issue too. I mean, I don't want to put capacities on, and I know that creates a whole problem for Mike, and it probably leads to tickets, right? And a certain number of tickets for the opposing team and for the parents and students. And I know it's pain, but I don't think it's that many games. I think it's basketball, and I think it's a select subset of the basketball games. I just don't, I think there is a real genuine safety issue. By the time you're smelling foul air, COVID is definitely circulating in that room. And it also helps with the mask management and the crowd management. So that's my 2 cents. I'd put a 50% cap on attendance, and not that we have to enforce it for every single game, but the games where we think we might get over that cap, we're going to have to ticket and have a police person present.
So I guess the question, Brian, then becomes, if that's what we want to be doing in Orono, what about when our athletes are going to other districts? Because like you said, if they go to another district where they don't have that policy in place and they've packed the gym, and it's a, you know, shoulder to shoulder basketball game, and you're smelling the sweat by the end of the, you know, by halftime, like, what's the deal there? Do we really want our students in that situation? Because even if they're vaccinated, they're susceptible to an unhealthy environment. We've worked so hard to create a healthy environment for our students in our schools, right?
Yep. I mean, I agree with you in principle, but I think in the end you have to give it up to local control, because the situations are just so different. Let me finish. But I think you have to leave it up to local control, and I'm not ready to tell our kids, hey, if the school shows up without masks, that's, you know, and the whole crowd shows up without masks, that's one thing. But I'm not ready to tell our kids they can't go play just because there's 1 hour 3 times in a 3-month period where, you know, it's a value judgment, and I respect different opinions, but that personally, that's where I come down, is I'm not ready. Right? It's management of risk. It's not elimination of risk. And so you know, half the games, it's no problem if it's in our site, and many of the games, it'll be no problem anyway, because they have bigger stadiums and bigger basketball gyms and things like that. And it will be an issue a couple times, but again, we're managing risk, not eliminating risk. So my personal opinion is I don't feel like we could. I don't, Meredith can chime in, but while I think we might have a chance of getting Penquist region to agree on masks, because I do think things have changed, right? Schools that didn't do masks all shut down. So I think school administrators have changed their position, and I think communities have changed their position. And there's also just this sort of peer pressure. If you get 70% of the schools say we won't play if you don't have masks, and all of a sudden you're only going to get to play 30% of your games, that focuses the mind too. But I think the spectator thing, there is some rationale behind local control, because every gym is different. We happen to have one of the smaller gyms relative to attendance, and I suspect it's less likely that you're going to get a consensus across the whole district around spectators and capping spectators. And Mark, to your point about playoffs, we're all valid, but maybe we can just leave the playoffs until February, because maybe, knock on wood, the MPA will come to its senses and step up, or a lot of things could change between now and then. So I'd be comfortable just saying this is until we get to the playoffs.
Well, I mean, if we were going to put a policy in place that said we would not allow any of our teams to play against schools that were mask optional, or that weren't requiring their athletes to, or spectators, however you wanted to word it. One, I don't know that I'd support it in any circumstance, but I certainly wouldn't support it if it didn't say throughout the regular season, right? And you're, you know, leaving that postseason for another day. I don't know that that would make any difference in how I voted, but if it didn't have that loophole, then I definitely would support it.
I guess my question was going to be, it may be wishful thinking to ask that, the Pennquist region all agree to limit spectators, but that's something we could at least go to the negotiating table and ask, right? We could say, hey, this is a concern. Is this something that other districts have thought about? That this could be one of those really packed games that are the biggest concern, and would anyone else be willing to talk about limiting capacity? Realizing that at 9 out of 10 times, you're not going to reach that 50% limit anyway, right? I mean, it seems like that's an easy rule of thumb to apply, because if you've got a facility that seats 1,000 and you say we're going to put a limit of 500 on, well, that's the same as 150 people facility, put a limit of 75 on. I think that's something we could consider asking if other regions have considered it.
I think it'll be hard to come to an agreement 100% on masks. I think we can, but I think it'll be challenging, and I don't think the region will come to an agreement on that particular topic. I don't think the region will agree on anything else other than masks, and no other region has. Like, it's masks, and then there's some recommendations, and then everything else is
goes
local
downhill
control.
from there.
And I just think that's the best that we can hope for, personally. And I just do think that every facility is different, and it's a trade-off really, to get the region to really align this much. And I guess I'm not hearing anyone suggest that, we shouldn't move forward with an assumption we're going to continue on with our mask requirement indoors for sports. And so that helps me move forward in the conversation this week, and I can keep you updated on how things progress.
I will say, similar to Mark, I don't like it, but I don't see how you can have, to Patrick's point, I don't see how you can have an indoor policy and then ignore it at the,
Yeah, it would be very good
after school hours. So.
I do think that we need to, as we've done throughout this, be willing and able to reconsider if circumstances change, right? I mean, if cases go up, then we need to take another look. If cases go down, then I think we also need to take another look. So, I mean, but I think if we're gonna, as long as the mandatory policy indoors for school activities is there for during the day, I don't see how you could have it.
I don't see how you can look a blind eye to it at night.
Yeah, I don't see how you could do that. So, and I think for all co and extracurriculars, I think that it's an issue. I do think, one of the things that we did learn during the winter sports season last year is that, with the exception of swimming, where the guidance is you can't have a mask on when you're in the pool. So I don't know what they're going to do with that one. I know they did virtual meets last year. I don't know what the plan is for swimming, but in all other circumstances, we were able to adapt, right? And kids were able to play with masks. And my experience was more directly with basketball, but the first couple of weeks, my kids in basketball were sucking a little bit of wind. After the first 2 weeks, they kind of got used to it, and then it was really kind of just it was a non-issue from a conditioning point for them. It was more of an annoying issue if it got kind of tangled up in something. But that's different than wrestling. I don't know how you wrestle in a mask, right? So we don't have a wrestling program, but so I don't know. I think it's again, I'm not thrilled with the idea of putting masks on our kids to compete in sports, but I don't see how we can get around it at the current point. And I think they'll be okay with it. I do think spectators, I hope Meredith's right. I hope that people want to watch enough that they're going to be willing to comply. I don't know that I'm as optimistic about that as you are. I generally tend to have a dimmer view of human nature than others, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
It's always a subset, right?
It generally is, no matter what you're looking at.
Yeah, Beth, have you been trying to get in?
No, I've largely been listening. I agree with, everybody for different reasons, but I think largely right, consistency is really important. I don't quite know where you know, I think the capacity thing, I do agree with you, Brian, that is an issue. You know, as Mark raised, I'm not totally sure, you know, do we have our own capacity to do ticketing or other types of ways to attempt to, you know, control capacity? I just don't know. And I don't know if that's an answer, you know, that's not a question I can answer. And then I did have one last thing. And it would, two things. One, actually, Meredith, I appreciate your orientation to building consensus. And I'm, you know, will keep my fingers crossed that that's what the group can do across the region, because I think that is the way that people will have the most buy-in, including the spectators. And then associated with that is, like, I think we're very good at, you know, communicating expectations for RSU 26 to our community members. So then the question becomes, you know, signage like outside of the building, you know, and maybe some extra masks handy for the spectators, you know, to A, remind them what the policy is, and also like, hey, you don't have an excuse. The masks are right here. Take one. That's it.
Okay.
Everybody good moving on? Okay, construction update.
Still on
Should we-
discussion items, sorry.
Yep.
I put in the folder, so the building committee has been considering what name we put outside the auditorium to indicate what the building is. And it's really kind of nuanced to figure out. We have a vision for use that is certainly beyond art. But I think one school of thought is to kind of, you know, many schools call this kind of building a performing arts center. When we were kind of designing it and trying to communicate our plans for use to the community, we really shifted to auditorium because we had, you know, so many uses in mind for the space that seemed like a better descriptor for what the use would be. So when we get to the point now where we want to, you know, figure out what to tell the architects in Bowman to buy for letters, we need to make a decision. And so we've kind of gone back and forth with some options, and Robin's given us some to consider. So the sketches that we put in the folder are a couple of options that she put forward for us, and then there's some other variations on these that Brian and I can share with you. And we bring this to you because there's a policy around naming, and I guess I'm a little uncertain as to whether the policy for naming applies here, or if it's more like if you're naming a building after someone, that policy applies. And this is really kind of like a signage for your building and calling it something that people understand what the entry is for. So I guess I'm a little unclear exactly how this falls within the policy, but I think a good discussion for us that Brian and I wanted to bring to you is, you know, what do you think makes sense for this space? And I think the building committee's consensus was we really liked having Orono in the title to kind of indicate that this is a community asset. You know, we envision this being something that will be used, you know, year round, probably with lots of different groups using this, many of our groups and then other groups. So we liked having the town names. It was a big investment from the town to have this as part of our project. But then from there, we talked about, do we add auditorium onto that? Do we add performing arts center? Do we add, you know, a word community in there? Like the Orono Community Performing Arts Center, Orono Community Auditorium. So those are some of the variations. These are basically backlit halo effect letters. So they don't come out as nice on this rendering as I think they'll be kind of backlit at night. So they'll really, you know, be a nice kind of feature on that very interesting looking building. So that's kind of the background I wanted to give you about this. And the reason we bring it now is that the items need to be ordered soon. sorry, we're having some power issues. We have to rectify here with someone's laptop. I might have to do that soon.
While the court trouble is going on, I'll say my piece. I just looked at that mock-up you sent over, and the Orno Performing Arts Center jumped out as just looking like something I'd be excited to go to. I mean, and so my question around that was, that being my initial reaction as a 45-year-old is not necessarily the same as someone who's a student, but it could be the same as a parent. And would that name have any bearing whatsoever on our recruitment recruitment efforts from other districts that are trying to choose where to send your kids to school, and they're into theater, and there's an Orno Performing Arts Center at Orno High School? Well, maybe that's the district we want to send our child to. You know, I mean, that was just kind of my thought.
Meredith, can you remind us what the other uses of the maybe Performing Arts Center are that would not fall under performing arts?
I mean, they're almost limitless. You know, guest lectures, you know, multi-class gatherings where they're going to, you know, have presentations, you know, school-wide assemblies where we can have everyone in one place on a variety of, you know, topics. So, I mean, lots of instructional uses that are just a part of our, you know, academic program. Additionally, I mean, I can imagine our board meetings transitioning to that space potentially. You know, just all kinds of things in that space.
Our annual school budget meeting.
Right.
You can imagine the town, they tend not to have big meetings, and they have a town council, but you know, if they do a big planning commission kind of thing, that you could imagine, you know, and when we sold this, we said, you know, if Orno has the wherewithal to pull together a Friday night movie night, we could do it there too. So I guess some of those things are arts and some of those things aren't, but certainly there's government and civics applications as well.
You know, before you said the word community, it was in my head. I personally like Orno Community Auditorium. I think it's important for us to give, I mean, this wouldn't have been possible without the support of the community, right? And obviously their vote for that bond. So I think it's really important to tie them into this as much as we can.
Do you think, Jake, that just putting Orno there would do that as opposed to like the RSU 26 Performing Arts Center? Or do you think that that's not enough?
I don't, because, you know, it would be like Brewer Auditorium or Bangor Auditorium. I see that more as the property of the school. I know we're technically RSU 26, but,
right,
you know, to me, we're just, you know, known as the Orno schools. So the word, I know you said that about, you know, putting Orno on there for that specific reason, but to me, that didn't resonate with me for that reason. To me, it was just like, well, it's the Orno schools, it's the Orno auditorium.
I felt pretty strongly about the word community until we started putting the word Orno in. I personally, I mean, my answer to Mark's question is probably yes. I feel like we should make it very clear it's a community property for all the reasons you said, and not a school. I mean, it is a school property and school usage guides it. School has first right to usage, but we want the community to feel welcome and a sense of ownership. But I feel like the word Orno, especially if the word Orno is in really big letters, might suffice for me personally.
So, and listen, I'm not going to fight on this too hard either way, but so before the introduction of the word Orno, was the thought like community performing arts center or community auditorium?
Yeah, I think the board, we did have a conversation on the board 6 months ago, and I think we kind of put the word community out there, but I don't think we had the word Orno out there at the time. So, and personally, yes, we have a lot of functions, but I think Performing Arts Center, well, it is the place to honor performing arts. We have athletic fields and classrooms, and I also just think it sounds better. And towards Patrick's point about recruitment, I think Performing Arts Center helps with recruitment. I don't think anybody's going to feel like, oh, gee, I can't go have a town meeting or a school board meeting just because it says Performing Arts Center. And to Shauna's point about acronyms, I think Meredith came up with this, but OPAC sounds a lot better than OA. So, you know, I personally, Orono Performing Arts Center, it's pretty close. I wouldn't oppose putting the word community in, but maybe as much as it on aesthetics as anything else, I would just go with the Orono Performing Arts Center.
We did look when we looked at some of these mock-ups that Robin showed us. I think there was one that had Orono Community Performing Arts Center and it just looked awkward in the space, right? The way
Too wordy.
it didn't look right in that space. And
Kind of
so
distracted from the rest of it because it was too much.
I just remember looking at it and looked weird. And I'm not like normally an aesthetics guy. Generally, I couldn't care less. But in that, I remember looking at that one and going, "Ooh, didn't look great." The same reason I kind of don't like. I'm fully in support of Orono Performing Arts Center. I don't really like the first of those two options, though, kind of with it centered over the doors. I like the fully left justified version. I just think that one where it's centered over the doors looked like we made a mistake. Looks, it just kind of looks sloppy to me. I know that some people on the building committee liked it. I kept looking at it and thinking that doesn't look good, but that's just me. And I don't have much of an eye for anything, as my wife would tell you, I'm sure. So that would be my preference.
Voting for number 4.
Yeah, and the people that spoke up on the building committee liked the right justification of it. So I feel like I'm about like Mark, that I don't have a good, I don't trust my eye would think.
Did they not do a center mock-up? I mean, that's one's full right, one's full left.
I don't remember seeing a center.
I don't think that was considered aesthetically
Our architect doesn't like centered.
desirable.
But you could take number 4 on right, justify it, right? With the Orono kind of over on the right-hand side, which would allow it to potentially be a little bit bigger.
I'm just noticing number 3 kind of slants the same way that the roof does.
Right.
Kind of nice. But yeah, I see what I like 3 and 4 both. Just, you know, someone put a chat comment in about acronyms. OPAC is the only acronym of all the combinations we were just talking about that didn't have a like strong political or religious affiliation with the top 3 searches on Google. So OPAC is an online library catalog in California somewhere, and all the other ones have either like conservative or religious search terms when you search for them. So I think having a non-religious and a non-political.
Like what other search did you do?
Oh,
I'm
gosh.
confused about what you're saying.
Well, I just started typing in the letters. So like if we did OCA, you know, you get the Orthodox Church in America.
Oh, I
Like,
see
you know,
you were just doing different.
I was just
Okay.
doing like if we just took the first letters and typed them
Did
in.
OA come up with anything?
That doesn't roll off the tongue anyway.
Overeaters Anonymous. I mean, I guess that's a good cause to like, you know, draw attention to. But I mean, you know, I'm not. Oh, there's also a Netflix series. So maybe.
So we should claim OPAC before other
Yeah,
people get there.
let's get the OPAC. I mean, it's a really nice library catalog system, which I like. If we're associated with that in any way, I've got no problem with that. I'm all about libraries.
I also like Performing Arts Center too. Jake, sorry. I know you like auditorium. And I like, what I was trying to figure out, you know, to Mark's point about like the right over the left, is it because the door itself, like it's hard to tell the 3-dimensional aspect of the entrance? But I guess they were doing it over the door rather than the entrance for the right justified.
Yeah, it's right justified with the end of that tile column.
Yeah.
Which our architect liked quite a bit. I mean, ultimately, I think we should pick the words and let the architect give some additional consultation on the aesthetics, but it seems like the board is leaning more towards 4 rather than 3. Maybe that's enough feedback to give to the architect and go from there.
I do like the acronym, I'll give you that.
Okay.
Okay.
I think the other thing here, just to alert the board of, is that we learned at the recent meeting, the construction meeting with the contractor, and then followed up with that same report at the building committee, that there's some two really significant material supply chain impacted delays with some auditorium elements that the contractor is saying is going to push back their completion by 2 months of the auditorium itself. So we're still, the architect's still working to understand that a little more and try to sort through that report. But so that's something that we've just learned of. I do think that, you know, I believe that that's very well what they're experiencing. I don't think they're being disingenuous about that at all. I've been frankly surprised we haven't had more of that. I mean, our first big frustration with that was the bleachers, and that was just several things that contributed to that particular element. I mean, we have gone for some alternate products at times when things were not available, but with this, it's just something that can't be avoided in that way. So more to come as we learn more. The good news side of the report on schedules, it looks like the classroom addition is going to be ready earlier than anticipated. So the timeline for completion was late February. I think substantial completion was supposed to be late January. And it's looking like we'll have these classrooms available to us probably, you know, maybe by Christmas. It's looking like our first of the year, but second semester. So that's really great news. And they also have said that it looks like the adjacent rooms, like the band and choir room, would not be held up from completion in the same way the auditorium, but they haven't been more specific than that. So the timeline news is, you know, the good with the bad. Did you have anything else on that, Aaron?
No, I think that's it. I mean, the auditorium just has always had all kinds of specialty equipment, from sound and curtains and sound clouds that are hanging there to bounce the sound around. So I don't think it's surprising that that's the place where they ended up with the worst supply chain issues.
Yeah, the two things that are delayed, it deals with our ductwork that is impacted by the cloud, that I had learned what the cloud was. But because we have to set up the scaffolding to do all of that, that can't come down until this delayed work is done. And that impacts everything else happening around where the scaffolding needs to be removed from to complete. And the second thing is material for the chairs is also delayed. Those are the two big items.
And the only other thing I'd say on the classrooms, and I don't want you to preview internal discussions or final answers, but there is a process going through the administration to figure out where those classrooms are going. They're not just going to whichever teacher, you know, grabs it first.
No.
Yeah. It happens that way sometimes in schools. Happens that way in my own office building. So.
No, I mean, we're Sam Meredith and I have been having some discussion about that, and we're moving forward. We're almost at the point of having a plan. We're just finalizing some things when we meet later this week, and then we'll begin talking with folks about that.
Musical chairs tournament.
So.
Yeah. A lot of times the sharpest elbows get the space, at least in my building.
Yeah. I mean, no, there's so many, there are really several choices that would, you know, make sense to do, or that could have good rationales behind them. And so I can just say at this point, there's, you know, it will likely be kind of a domino effect of what we think will happen. And, you know, we have people who are floating right now who don't have adequate spaces. And so we look forward to being able to relieve some of that pressure that's being felt right now with, you know, we have increased enrollment and not enough space to serve them in. Oh, the other space that, and I'm trying to get a timeline on this, is the old kitchen is going to be renovated as a small, kind of, we call it a support space. It's really a smaller sized classroom. So that's another new instructional space that will open up in this last phase of the project. So what's that, 4, 5, 6, 7 classrooms that open up, you know, over the next couple of months. So it's going to be a great help for our school.
Any other questions or comments on construction? All right, moving on to co-curricular nominations. There's no hiring, right? Moving on to co-curricular.
Wait, no, I'm gonna talk about that later. Go ahead. Sorry.
Moving on to co-curriculars, I would make a motion to approve the slate of co-curricular hires as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And just to read them, varsity cheering, these are all at the high school. Varsity cheering, Travis Cole. Boys varsity basketball, Ed Catala. Boys JV basketball, Sean Tochi. Boys freshman basketball, Ryan Charette. And that's great that that program's grown to the point to have a freshman team. It's first in my memory in this district. Nordic skiing, halftime Sid Dijak. Nordic skiing, halftime Ann Ross. Unified coach Kevin Mansfield. Indoor track Chris Libby. OMS OHS subcaller Heidi Clark. Show choir choreographer Dan Perkins. Geek squad coordinator Emily Jackson Sanborn. Any discussion or questions? We'll go ahead and vote. Beth?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Okay, we'll move on to policies. So they look like a large number. 2 of them are pretty big. Several of them are just a few words. So we'll start with ACAP, which is the workplace bullying policy. This one, there is a new state law that requires this to be in place technically by yesterday. That's when main state laws take effect, and every district has to have a policy on workplace bullying. The policy committee's gone through this policy. It is largely the same as the Drummond and Woodsum recommended policy. There's clearly some issues inherent in the law. They're not necessarily, I mean, it's a good problem to have, but especially when it comes to parents, if it's a parent who's doing the workplace bullying of a teacher or an employee, there's limited power we have over that person if they're not committing a crime. But, you know, that doesn't mean we shouldn't try and be doing a better job of addressing those issues. The only other thing I would add, most of the edits are small, specifying who's handling the problem. The paragraph in red at the bottom of C was something that the policy committee put in after consultation with our lawyer to provide some indication of potential for protection for people who complain about workplace bullying. Without that phrase, there is no statement of any kind about protecting people with workplace protection. Now, there are a lot of places where it gets complicated, right? When an employee makes an accusation against another employee, they both have rights to due process and things. So there's legal limits. But I think we discussed and felt like we should put that, you know, with the lawyer's approval. Admittedly, it was, I think, a little grudging approval, but he was like, this statement's okay. You can back this up. So I just wanted to that is the distinction from what came from MSMA.
Hey, Brian, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you clarify which document we're looking at? Because I'm looking at a few that look like they have the same title.
Well, they all look really close. There's ACAB, ACAD, ACAA, but this one is ACAF.
Thank you.
So forward October 19th, ACAF workplace bullying. So it's a big change. Technically, it's supposed to be on the books by yesterday, but I think Meredith and I both felt more comfortable that we should go through the policy process and give this first read and 2 weeks and a second read since it's a whole new policy. We could choose not to do that and adopt it immediately, but that would be the recommendation from the policy committee. So I would make a motion to recognize a first read on ACAF. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any comments or questions on the policy? Good. All right, we'll go ahead and vote on recognizing the first read. We'll come back at least 2 weeks later for a second and final read. Beth?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Okay, next up, I'm going to recommend that we take these together, ACAA and ACAA-R. For those of you who aren't used to policy naming conventions, the R is like the detailed regulation that spells out the process, and the thing without the R is just a quick high-level statement of goals and intent. And I'm going to recommend we take them together. The only changes in both of these, so these are anti-discrimination for students. The main state law has updated protected classes to include gender identity, which in some cases we did have already. We had it here, and familial status. And so it was recommended that we update our policies to also include familial status, and if not already there, gender identity as protected classes. So those are the only changes. So I'd make a motion, and since they're small changes, I'm recommending we adopt it just as a revision with a single read. So I'd make a motion to approve the revised versions of policy ACAA and ACAA-R as presented. Is there a second? Any further discussion or questions? Okay, we'll vote. Beth?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up is exact same story, ACAB and ACAB-R, which are harassment and sexual harassment of employees. The last one was students. And I think in one of these cases, we had left out gender identity. Yeah. So we added both gender identity and familial status. So I would make a motion to recognize, sorry, not to recognize, to approve the revision of policy ACAB and ACAB-R as presented. Is there a second?
No second.
Any further discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Beth?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Okay, the changes to JKAA and JKAA-R, again, I would recommend considering them together, are bigger. I think the recommendation of the policy committee was that we go ahead and consider this as a revision. This is in response to a state law change that took place on Monday. And this has quite a few legal implications. And it also is, you know, it's not in any way a trivial change in terms of how it's going to impact the schools, but from a policy point of view, you know, it's less than 10% of the text changing. So the recommendation was to consider it as a revision and adopt it as a revision. You know, if we want to get too into the details of what's happening here, we should probably get Lisa to comment. She was kind enough to
Brian,
do.
it's worth noting for the full board that, you know, Lisa is the primary author of these revisions, right? I mean, this wasn't just the policy subcommittee. I mean, Lisa's the one that guided these. Is she really, along with Meredith, has the appropriate expertise on this? I mean, that's not something that you and I
That's right.
would do. So I mean,
These are Lisa's edits.
Yes.
Of her understanding.
It came directly from the revised policy that we were provided from. I think Drummond and Woodson gave us a revised policy, only it wasn't marked up. So Lisa was kind enough to go through and kind of do the track changes for us. So, and it's, you know, as Brian said, there's some what look like maybe just small wording changes, but have some significant impact. So Lisa is, and you know, our administrative team is going to have to respond to that with helping people understand these changes. Any questions or?
I mean, just to give you a couple of examples, right? It went from a risk of injury to an imminent risk of serious physical injury, right? So it just kind of upped the standard on physical restraint. And in many ways, probably it's much harder, you know, as a teacher in a position in real time to make a judgment about is there imminent risk of serious physical. But on the other hand, I understand the motivation as well. As we evolve as a society, we hope we do these things less often. And personally, you know, I think we're proud of how we handle this already in the district. So, you know, another one that's maybe problematic is seclusion. It's if the student does not feel free to leave. And when you start really rolling that through on the legal implications, that, you know, that gets to the student's state of mind, which is a really hard thing to decide. But be that as it may, this is what Drummond and Woodson told us we have to do to comply with the state law. So that's where this is coming from. So I would make a motion to adopt the revision of policy JKAA and JKAA-R. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, discussion and questions.
Yeah, I guess I've just got one community member that's kind of been in touch with me about this, and I think I would like to ask if we could put this one as a first read, second read also, just so that I have a chance. Because I did not do my due diligence before this meeting to read this policy and realized that this was on the docket, and I apologize for that. But I'd like to just kind of get his input because he was one of the advocates for the state law change, and I just.
Oh, I think I know who you're referring to. I mean, this is conforming to the law that he was advocating to pass. So I think I'd personally rather put it on the books right away. But
my guess is if Alan didn't like it, we would have all heard about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just don't know if he's seen the policy.
Oh, I guarantee you he's seen it.
Okay. I mean,
this is the policy that conforms to the law change, so.
Right. Most of the changes come straight out of the law, which Alan helped to pass. So, I mean, it's not just like the policy, but the wording, right? That change to imminent risk of serious physical harm. That is the law, which Alan advocated for. So.
Okay. Yeah, I guess. My only question was, you know, the law was an improvement over what we previously had for the state, and I agree with these changes, and as all laws are compromises, I think that this was something where we feel, and the advocate community feels like this goes far enough, versus is there anything we could do to continue to improve beyond the minimum of the law? That's kind of my question.
Well, I guess I would argue that should be a whole additional process. We're just trying to catch up with the law because we're already one day out of compliance.
Okay.
And I'm open to having a further discussion about going further than the law, but that feels like a different conversation.
And we can always revise it after we adopt it. If you want to, you can revise it in 2 weeks. So.
That sounds fine with me. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Well, I guess I would just say that I'm not sure we agree yet that this is an improvement. I think there's some concerns that, you know, are challenges with this. So I don't want to reflect that we feel like these changes are going to help us serve our students better. I think there's things about this we don't quite yet know how it's going to play out because it's unclear to us how and what this means. So I would just add that to that last thing that was said.
This is a perfect example of legislation that could end up having unanticipated and unintended consequences.
Yeah.
But given the fact that it's state law, I don't think we have any choice on.
No, we don't have any.
It was sausage making. It got majorly amended in the last week. It was considered. And, you know, some of the things in general, I agree we should be improving in this area, but the one I highlighted about seclusion and whether the student, you know, if the principal's talking to a student, and this doesn't just apply to students with a 504 plan or IEP, this applies to every student. Principal's talking to a student and gets a phone call and says, excuse me, I'm just going to step out. Can you wait here before I come back? Does that student now think they're in, you know, mandatory seclusion? And some students are going to think yes, and some students are going to think no. And that one in particular feels to me like a really, you know, the issue I raised of deciding in the moment whether imminent risk of serious physical injury, where there's no definition of serious physical injury, is it loss of life or limb, or is it a bruise, right? That puts our teachers in a lot of judgment situations. I don't have a problem with the phrase per se. It's just, I think the DOE really needs to come out with some guidelines for what this means so the teachers aren't on the line for the judgment about it. But that other one about the student thinks they're secluded is just a Pandora's box. I don't disagree with the principle, but the implementation is really challenging. But other things about this law, you know, like I agree in general, up in our standards is good. One of the best things about this law, from my point of view as a public school board member, is this now applies to private schools as well, where some of the standards did not, the reporting standards did not previously apply. So there's some leveling of the floor, and it's a mixed bag.
I think what's going to happen with this is a lot more is going to be reported than was previously reported. So it's going to look like there's a lot more restraint and seclusion happening. But they're defining it differently. So that's the other part that I'm just not sure.
Yeah,
Was that the goal? Was that the intent? I'm not sure. So.
I mean, could be a good thing to, at the reporting, but
Yeah.
if this then turns into, oh, look, restraint and seclusion is up, that's actually not an accurate summarization of what's happening. So it's complicated, but it's state law and it passed. So I think we're all doing our best to implement it, and this policy is a piece of that.
Okay.
All right, we're going to vote. Beth?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. The last change is a very small one, which has been discussed in policy committee, including with the union representation. It's personnel records. It's really, I think, just an update. By and large, personnel records are confidential. There's some minimal information that's officially allowed to be public, such as the name of the employee. I don't think we post most of these things, but technically we could. But the thing that we have been posting all the time and did not have permission through our policy to post was the RSU 26 phone number and email of our teachers and staff. And so we wanted to get that into the policy as something that we can list as part of directory information. So I would make a motion to adopt the revision to policy GBJ as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
This comes clearly out of our rolling review of policies. Any further discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Beth?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. So that was a lot of policy lifting, but I think, yes, that's the end. So next up is MOU related to a new position. We did talk about this with the board last week, or 2 weeks ago, last meeting. You want to introduce it again, Meredith?
Yeah, so this MOU really just follows what we talked about with the kitchen manager position, and Shauna and I met and came up with what we think is the right salary range. You see that on the attachment, and Shauna was kind enough to draw this up for us so we can move forward. We did advertise the position as anticipated, and I'm pleased to say we have some good interest already. So I think this seems, I'm gonna hope that things continue to move forward, but seems to be drawing in applicants in a new and different way than we were seeing before. So you need to just approve this MOU, and then Brian will sign tonight and Shauna tomorrow, and then we can take off anticipated and make it official.
So MOUs are how we modify the collective bargaining agreements between negotiation periods, and they're also negotiated. So I would thank the union for working with us to make this happen, because as Meredith said, it was really important for ultimately feeding our kids in a sustainable way. So I would make a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding on adding the kitchen manager position to the EPS collective bargaining agreement. Is there a second?
My second.
Any discussion? Sorry, ESP, it should have been, not EPS. Any further discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Beth?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. All right, and now we come up with another MOU, which again was discussed 2 weeks ago, but Meredith?
Yeah, so we've got a notice recently from the state that the minimum wage is now indexed, so it's not quite as predictable as it was before. So they advertised that it's going up to $270 or $12.75 on January 1st. So in looking at our pay scale, we do have two classifications of employees that need to be adjusted. And so I spoke with the OEA, Sean and I talked about this, and after consultation with them, we came up with this solution to simply move those any impacted members of those classifications on that particular zero pay scale, step zero, to move up to the next year now, and then they'll just stay there as we start next year. So that's our solution to this. I'll just say that we're going to be coming back to you probably next meeting with a recommendation around how we address this with our sub-pay. So we're looking at that right now and just looking at comps, trying to figure out where to put our sub-pay relative to the minimum wage change as well.
So I would make a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding, adding the wage adjustment agreement to the ESP contract. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion or questions? We'll go ahead and vote. Beth?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. We're close here. One more vote, and then we'll be able to wrap up pretty quickly. Thank you for everybody hanging in. So we've discussed this too, SREP application to use up the remaining SREP money that we can get for ASA Adams. There's a cap over 5 years, and to mostly apply ESSER funds, potentially a little bit of our own construction budget and or maintenance budget. But basically the K2 wing would get univents, the wall ventilators like you see over here, as opposed to a centralized system that was originally designed for what was a open area concept that has been turned into classrooms. So it's a very much needed update. And we'll be able to get 56% of it paid for by the state. So, and most of the rest of it paid for by the federal government with ESSER 2 funds. So I would make a motion to approve the district submitting an application for ventilation at ASA to SREP. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All right, we're going to vote. Beth?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. I'm going to aim to keep subcommittee reports really short. Policy committee is not meeting for a couple more weeks, and although we have moved to Mondays, that's an important thing to note. For this school year, we've moved to Mondays at 3:30, first Monday of the month at 3:30 instead of Thursday at 3:30 to accommodate the schedule.
So, could you send out a reminder on that? I already forgot we did that.
Okay, I'll send out a reminder.
I remember it now, but I forgot until you did it.
Yep. Other than that, I don't think we have any other heavy lifting. We kind of caught up with the state laws. There are a couple, I take it back, there's a couple marked for more attention, and then we'll continue with our rolling into the eyes. UTC?
I'll just mention that the focus continues to be on recruitment of the new director.
Spruce?
Meeting Thursday.
Curriculum? I think we haven't met since we
did meet, I believe. I wasn't there, but.
Oh yeah, we did. Meredith, you want to go ahead?
We talked about data analysis in schools and Wabanaki studies, and we'll be setting goals next meeting.
Facilities, I think you've all heard. Any requests for other business? Any future agenda items? Anybody still hanging in, want to make a public comment? You certainly have deserved it. Not seeing any public comment. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, November 2nd, in person and Zoom at 6 p.m. Mark, Meredith, and I both think we should easily be, unlike tonight, easily be out of there by necessary time. So we should be able to make that work. We'll stick with the date if that's okay. Any requests for information or follow-up? Okay, I would make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? We'll vote. Beth?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Aye. We're done. Thank you, everybody. That was a long one. The next couple I'm hoping will be shorter. Thank you.
Good night.
Hi, Bob. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for hanging in. We went through a lot of stuff.